All right, what's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. We've made it one day close to Friday. That's how I like to think of it. Mike Thomas here. I am going to go through weather real quick. But like I said yesterday, I don't want to do weather every day. So I've just been exploring the interwebs today, looking for some fun little stories that just to chat about that I thought were halfway interesting. Some have to do with this area, some don't, and one contains an application. Hence why I'm on my phone here, downloading the app so we can see whether or not it works. So, all right, let's do the weather first. I want to bring back that satellite and radar here in D.C. Starting off with a little bit of clouds. We're seeing the clouds around the region holding a little thicker than even I expected earlier this morning. We started with some sun, but clouds have moved in. But it's a boundary coming through. You see how the clouds kind of over D.C. right now are pushing east, and then the clouds near Frederick are coming south. So there's a weak little boundary coming through. That's pushing the air up. That's getting the clouds in the sky. But as we head into the afternoon, I do think dry air is going to win out, and the clouds should become more and more spotty. So still a decent amount of sunshine today. Should be a pretty nice day, and most certainly not expecting any rain around the region as we head through the day today. All right, let's head over and talk. We'll talk some hurricane stuff. And by hurricane stuff, I mean potential hurricane stuff. Let me get rid of the Chiron there, and there we go. I want to point out this spinning feature way out in the Atlantic. Of course, naturally, we're here, eastern half of the United States. We're looking in the eastern half of the Atlantic Ocean. That little spin, not going to come anywhere near us. That's the cold front that came through a few days ago. That's going to ship out the storm off to the north and east there. But that storm now has a moderate chance, according to the National Weather Service, 50% chance of developing into the next named storm here, believe it or not. Yes, we have 16 days left to hurricane season that we're still kind of dealing with. So that could become Tropical Storm Sean if it develops. That was the next. I couldn't remember what the name was yesterday. Now I know today. It's going to be Sean if it does develop. Quickly through the week this week, still tracking the chance of maybe a shower or two on Thursday. That's the European model. We're obviously want to be focused on this region right here. That is us within that little black box right there. Maybe a couple of spotty showers during the morning hours of Thursday, but it should get better as we head through the day. Next chance of rain after that is going to be Saturday-ish. And I say Saturday-ish because we have a little bit of model disagreement. We went with chance of showers on Saturday here in D.C. On the news this morning. But there is the chance that Saturday could end up being drier, and maybe it's more of a Saturday night into Sunday morning thing. I'll show you the difference. This is the European. That's actually the drier solution. So that's through the afternoon hours on Saturday. You don't see any green right over D.C. there if you look hard enough. I know it's probably small on some of your screens here. But over D.C., you'll just have to trust me. It's not showing a whole lot of rain Saturday afternoon. You got some showers off to the north there. I know Tucker's going to State College, so it's his first Penn State football game later on this weekend. He might have to deal with some showers. But here in D.C., we may make it through the first half of the day dry, and then it really kind of brings the front through with some showers on Sunday morning. Let's see. Benji says it's getting so cold fast these days. What's up, Benji? What's going on, man? Yeah, it seems to be getting cold, and we got more cold on the way because I'll forward this out a little bit. Look behind. That's cold air spilling in Sunday into Monday. That's kind of your next real big cold shot. But let me show you the differences, and let's see what timestamp I have here. So here's the differences between the two models that we need to kind of figure out here in the weather department. Which one's going to be right? Which one's going to be wrong? This is, and check your time at the bottom here, 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. I'll kind of highlight it right there. That's from the European. Here's the GFS. GFS has the front way, so I'll kind of draw it there. That's where the GFS has the front, way off the coastline, and it's a lot colder on the American run of the model there. On the European run, it's not as cold. The front's much slower, so the rain comes late Saturday into Sunday morning, whereas if the American solution here is right, the rain comes like all day on Saturday, and then we start getting cold Saturday night into Sunday. which one's right now, I'm not too sure. I kind of split the difference here and went with like evening showers on Saturday for now. We'll see which one's right and which one's right and which one's wrong. Will have an impact on just how cold the next cold shot is coming down, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. Another way to look at it, what's that causing that big difference? You got to go back to the upper levels. I've said this before on here. Upper levels are what wins out. This is the European side of things, what the Europeans showing from the pattern-wise. Again, you don't really, we're looking at upper level heights here for the weather weenies out there, 500 millibars. For those not concerned with that, just know we need to be paying attention to what are known as the blocks, which are the areas of reds and oranges, and the troughs, which are the areas of blue. The key difference between the European and the American right now is this is, watch your timestamp here, this is on Monday. Your timestamp, by the way, is right here. So Monday 6Z, which is like 1 in the morning on Monday morning, as the real core of the cold is coming down. Coldest morning does look like Monday, regardless of which model is right, but how extreme that cold is will depend on which model is right. So same time from the GFS, differences are humongous for just 6 days out. Big bridge out through the western half of the United States. Nice big block up in Greenland. That's going to get you big time cold. Look at the, see that degree of white? That's big time cold here in the eastern half of the United States there. That's the American end of things. Look at the difference in the European. It's missing that entire ridge almost. Now, I tend to like, I mean, that's, look at the timestamps again. Same time, same day, completely different pattern almost. So that's something we're going to have to watch towards the end of the week, and we'll see how strong this next cold front comes in, depending on which model ends up being right. I'll update, we'll watch this over the next few days. We'll see how things pan out here. The one thing to watch if the GFS is right, and again, not saying it is, but if it is, there's a chance for maybe a snow flurry or two during the evening hours of Sunday into Monday morning. That's a strong northwest wind coming straight off the Great Lakes. If the GFS is not right, we won't see them. If the European is correct, we will not see the snow flurries. We won't be cold enough, and winds won't be strong enough out of the north and west to see any snow flurries. And again, flurries very hit and miss, if at all. Again, I was hesitant to even bring this up today, but I did want to mention that, yes, perhaps maybe a flake or two would be possible in our area. Or late Sunday night into Monday morning, if this model is right. We'll see. Again, I tend to lean more towards the European camp than the American camp, just because the European tends to do better. All right, looking at Thanksgiving, let's snap ahead real quick, because I want to keep this quick, get to the 5 little fun stories I found online, and then we'll move on. Thanksgiving, we have, basically, we're looking at cooler than normal temperatures, it looks like right now. The question is cold or chilly? That's kind of the question. And warm or cold or chilly, and dry or wet. You know, the two questions we're trying to answer. This is the European side of things. Big, strong area right there of high pressure coming down through the central portion of the United States, dumping cold air into the eastern half of the U.S. again. And that would be cold turkey on Thanksgiving Day. That's about 7, 8 o'clock on Thanksgiving evening. Lots of cold in place here in the U.S., but dry. That's the key with the Euro model here. Difference with the American model, it's got a storm coming up the Appalachians. Not a snowstorm, at least not here. There could be snow up there if this is correct, up through upstate New York and maybe northeastern Pennsylvania. But here in D.C., coming up the Appalachians like that, that would put us in the warm sector of the storm. That would be kind of a rainy, showery day during the day. You see the same Arctic high is deflected a little bit too far to the west to push that storm out to the east and out to sea and not affect us. We'll see how the model pans out. Again, this is what, 10 days away? 10 days away in terms of whether or not it's going to be right. You know how the weather likes to change on a day-to-day basis. We'll see here, but that little that area low pressure coming up would bring us some showers and kind of damper things on Thanksgiving Day. Would still be cool though, just not as cold as that big bomb of a high coming down in the European. It's still chilly, but it's not cold enough for snow, at least not in DC, and it's not as cold as the European would be. All right, that's all I have for the weather today, guys. I said I wanted to keep it quick. We will we'll watch that again going through the week. I'll update you every day on how this weekend looks with the next cold air mass dropping down and how Thanksgiving looks, because people have travel plans. People got Thanksgiving plans. I'll try and keep you ahead of that as much as I can. All right, in the meantime, I want to try and do something a little bit different on some days, just because, watching me talk about weather every single day could get a little boring from time to time. So I'm a weather geek through and through, but I get it. Every day, hitting the weather every day would drive some people nuts. I will certainly mention it every day, but we won't do as much detail every day. Instead, today I'm kind of want to do something called Bring on the Snow. I know, right, Kathy? Today I kind of want to do something called what I'm going to call like my top 5, which is where I kind of look at news stories that maybe don't make it onto our newscast because they're a little more lighthearted or things that are kind of niche. I hope I said that word right. But they're not big-time breaking news. It's not something that, say, we missed. It's more like, these are fun little tidbits that may slip through the cracks that I kind of found interesting as I kind of search the interweb here. So we're going to start things out here. I'm calling this like my top 5 fun little stories of the week. I got to work on the naming a little bit. So number 1 from this week that I found just the other day came from UPI, which I believe stands for Universal Producers International. I'll have to check on the naming here and just make sure I'm giving credit where it's due, but upi.com is the website. Apparently talk about luck. Apparently this woman down towards, I believe Charlottesville is she's from. That's her right there. So she won the lottery not once, not twice, but 3 times just over the course of the past several weeks here. Kind of peaking with, I guess, the $5 million jackpot win that she won on November 10th is when they released the story. So this is a few days old. This is about 4 days old. Brenda Gentry won $5,000 on a scratcher and used some of that money to buy a $500 lottery ticket, and then went and bought I guess a Mega Millions ticket or a Virginia 50 times the money ticket. There you go, at Charlottesville, and got a $5 million top prize. So all scratch-offs for this lady, which means I'm going to have to start getting myself back into scratch-offs. Totally, I did it a lot in college. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't addicted, and I know some people have gambling addictions and they should stay away. But I did do it quite a bit just to try and get a little bit of extra college money. And I think the most I ever won was $10. My roommate won $100 once while we were at college playing the things. And it was, it's fun, but she won 3 times. $500, $5,000, $5 million. So congratulations to Miss Gentry there. And, good for her. Good for her winnings. All right, second little fun story I found was just kind of an update since I cover the hurricane so much. This was from our friends at Fox 8 down in North Carolina, WGHP. Just wanted to give a shout out to these companies. I'm not sponsored by them. We're not sponsored by them. I do shop at TJ Maxx, and I actually like TJ Maxx. These companies, we all know how much Irma did, how much Maria did, and of course Harvey in Houston, and all these locations still need help. So don't forget about Houston. Don't forget about all the islands out there that Irma did so much damage to. U.S. Virgin Islands still need the help. British Virgin Islands still need the help. And all those Leeward Islands that got hit certainly still need the help. But it's nice to see some companies stepping up. And they're companies I didn't really think would. No offense to them. Starbucks is one of them, though it's not listed here. But Starbucks has kind of stepped up, and they're basically paying their employees their salaries and their hourly wages, even though their stores are closed in Puerto Rico due to all of the aftermath of Hurricane Maria and all the devastation it did down there. So certainly want to give a shout out to that. I think that's awesome, especially because I feel like a lot in the news these days we're hearing so much about how, say, not so much TJ Maxx, but some of the bigger department stores that are under the TJ Maxx umbrella. TJ Maxx is one of the ones also paying salaries. I believe Marshall's is, J.C. Penney's is, and it's those kind of stores, like Lens Crafters is as well down there in Puerto Rico. And it's those kind of stores that almost surprise me a bit, because we hear so much about how about how they've been, not hitting their marks financially here in the States, and they've had to close a lot of stores and have a lot of cutbacks. So it's nice to see them doing some good and helping their employees down there in Puerto Rico get through these tough times thanks to the hurricanes. All right, next fun little story I kind of found was something that just kind of made me laugh a little bit, which was that the first Black Friday shopper that we know about here in the United States lined up to shop down in Texas. And this is another, I'm going to have to give a shout out here to an affiliate down there. This is KGNS down in let's see, Lombardo, Texas? Laredo, Texas. They had the first guy who didn't want to be identified. He said, "What's up, Wiz? Hey, when are we doing the next picks? Tomorrow?"
Is it? Oh, it's Wednesday, isn't it?
No, it's today's Tuesday.
No, tomorrow is Wednesday.
But yeah, tomorrow's Wednesday. So they can't see you right now, do you?
Where's
Do you want to see it? See, it's right there.
What?
That's right.
Okay.
Your face is over the little Fox 5 thing.
Okay.
Yeah, tomorrow. How about tomorrow? Wednesday
Tomorrow.
wisdom. Wednesday wisdom.
Wisdom versus Mike Tyson. Last week you won.
Are you gonna bring that?
Oh, that's right.
Are you gonna bring that
I
Chick-fil-A? Yeah, you lost. You lost. You owe me the Chick-fil-A. I'm eating good tomorrow. Finally. All right. Next little. Yeah, Benji, she came out big. Next little thing I have, and yeah, keep the comments coming. I'm trying to check. You're on the side of my screen here, so I'm trying to check. I'll try and. It looks like I got Kathy and Benji in here. All right, 2. Welcome, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Here's the other story. Back to Black Friday stuff. First guy lines up, and if all goes to plan and he stays there in the parking lot through the next several days, he would have lined up for 17 straight days to be able to would have camped outside of this Best Buy down there for 17 days ahead of Black Friday just to be able to get in first. Apparently, according to WGNS there in Texas, he's always there. He's always one of the first people in line. I heard last year, or I read that last year he might have been second, and that upset him. So instead of risking it, he's just going for it all this year. According to the news source down there, he has TV. He's got enough food to last him for several days. He brought his video game console, so he's going to kind of be hanging out and enjoying life outside that Best Buy. I guess the Texas fall hasn't been as bad as, or rather as cold as our fall has been here, and I believe I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's southern Texas. So good on him. If you're crazy about the Black Friday shopping, go for it. Me personally, I used to do a lot of Black Friday shopping. I totally admit this. I would go out, my siblings and I have a sister and a brother. We would go out here locally after Thanksgiving dinner. We would go we had a Kohl's up the street, we had a Target up the street, and we would hit that. But we wouldn't we'd finish our dinner and wait till the family kind of left, and then we'd go out. We wouldn't camp out. I would never camp. I don't know, what would it take, for you guys to, yeah, Kathy, I'll have Wisdom bring you some stuff. Yeah, and you're right, Benji. It might be time for me to do some lotto tickets too, if I'm beating Wisdom in this football thing. I don't know. What would it take you guys to camp outside of a Best Buy for 15 days? I mean, he's got to have something he wants, you would think, right? I don't know. Good on him. I mean, if you have the time. What about work? Does he not work? Is he not working for the next 15 days? I don't know. All right. Back to the next story. 2 more stories. 2 more fun little stories. This one's comes from Fox News, Fox National, Fox News Channel. So got to give them, again, got to give these little shout outs here and there since I'm using their stuff on their website. McDonald's ice cream app. Thank you for this so much, McDonald's. One of my, and this near and dear to my heart, because one of my favorite things to do is get milkshakes at McDonald's. Addicted to the chocolate. Extra whipped cream, yes. One of the things I absolutely hate is when I go to the one down the street from me and it doesn't have any ice cream. So McDonald's apparently released this app. It's called and let me scroll down here. It's called the Ice Check app. Ice Check app right there. That you can actually check and see if your McDonald's ice cream machine is working. So I downloaded it on my phone here. and I literally haven't started it up just yet. So let's fire it up, and we'll see if it works. So we're here in DC. So yeah, that's kind of the starting screen there, as it gives you this little terminal. I'll go ahead and go to the map, and that's the center of the country. I'll hit that little locator button, and there's where I am. So it looks like there's one right down the street. We do have a McDonald's right down the street from the station here on Wisconsin. And according to that, let's see. Oh, okay, so I see how this works now. So if you look there, let's see if it says ice cream machine status off. However, it looks like it's user generated, because it says last vote posted on the 14th, which is today. It looks like it does UTC time, so 16:30. That might have actually just been me, because I flicked the thing by accident. But it looks like I, as a user, actually have to go to the McDonald's and flick it on and off. Because see, I can turn it on, and I guess I'm giving false information because it was off when I got there. But I guess I'm saying it's working now, whereas I should leave it off. So I guess, okay, cool, but I'd like to see a way where instead of me having to go through and say that the ice cream machine's working, that McDonald's actually goes through and says, hey, check out one of our other locations because it's not working here. Also, what's semi-annoying to me is I live up near Columbia, Maryland, which is there. And if you can tell, there's no symbols there, which means none of the McDonald's in my neighborhood are reporting, which are always the ones where I go, and half the time the machine's not working. So still some things to get out there, but I love the fact that at least it's a start. All right, last story for the day. Anybody gamers? Benji, Kathy, either one of you gamers? Or do you guys focus more on the just, work, life, jobs? I used to be a big gamer in college, sort of a big gamer. I used to play a lot of games. Good way to kill some time. But I work nowadays, and it's sort of hard to find the time to play games. Anyway, I found this morning, and I thought it was semi-funny. New Star Wars video game coming out, and that's Star Wars Battlefront 2. What's up, Steve? From EA Games. Again, we're not doing video game reviews or anything. This is what it looks like. Anyway, apparently this game is getting a ridiculous amount of backlash. You see all the characters there. If you're a Star Wars fan, you can play as Rin, the new character. You can play as Darth Maul. You can play as all these characters. Your favorite from the movies. Obviously, the franchise is huge. You can play in all these big battles. But apparently, according to several different websites out there, a big one being GameSpot, that if you want to play as those characters, it's going to cost you extra money. Video games these days, I have an Xbox. I play Xbox occasionally whenever I have time. I use it more as a media player these days than an actual gaming machine. But occasionally on the weekend, I'll have enough free time that I can sit down and play a round of Halo or Call of Duty or something like that. I did play Battlefront 1 back in the day. I'm pretty sure or Star Wars Battlefront's an older game, I believe, on the 360. I haven't played any of the new ones that have come out recently. This is supposed to be a really big release, that I do know, but apparently because of how much extra it costs, so $60 for the game itself, and then in addition to that, you have to pay if you want to unlock these characters, or you have to play the game for like a ridiculous amount of time. Apparently to unlock some of the players, you actually have to play in-game for 40 hours. That's 5 days straight, or 5 work days straight of sitting and playing for 8 hours a day for 5 days. That's a lot of time in video game land. So apparently everybody's so upset about this, they're starting a little boycott here. I'm big on the website Reddit. I use it all the time. And this post about this game became the most hated post of all time on Reddit just this morning. And let's say it's not loading up for me, so let me come back here and refresh the page. Apparently, it's got and we'll do a live check here. But on Reddit, the way Reddit works is it's sort of like you upvote stories, you downvote stories, and that that kind of controls where they appear on the page. The more you upvote something, the higher it will appear on the page, and the more you downvote something, the lower it will appear. Well, apparently fans got onto EA's Reddit and they started complaining, hey man, that's too much money. You know, how come I pay $80, $60 to $80? Apparently there's a collector's edition with $80 an $80 price tag. They're like, how come you pay $80 and all this stuff's not unlocked? You still need to pay more to unlock it. And apparently you can buy these things called mystery crates where it'll unlock something random for you. And GameSpot, that site I just showed, spent $100 on it, on the game itself, doing all these random unlocks, and still, after $100, didn't unlock all of the coolest features, they said, and still didn't unlock everything. And that's an additional $100 on top of the $60 the game costs. So Reddit just went absolutely berserk this morning, and I'm going to pull it up right here as soon as I check and make sure I'm not getting any of the bad language, because Reddit people are occasionally upset over things. But this was the official kind of form on the Star Wars Battlefront Reddit page. And this is someone who actually works for EA, who this person asked, seriously, I paid $80, how come Darth Vader's locked? And the guy from EA, and let me scroll down here so everybody can see, the guy from EA wrote in and said, hey, our intent is to provide players with a sense of pride and accomplishment for unlocking different heroes. I get that. But the problem is, as this guy points out, everyone's where is it? I saw it earlier, but me having to reload it kind of jumbled things up. But basically, someone pointed out that I would feel the sense of accomplishment if you couldn't unlock it with money, but instead they're making these accomplishments so hard to reach that the lazy will inevitably just unlock it with money instead. And it has the most downvotes in the site's history by far. If you can see that number, that's 670,990, so nearly 671,000 downvotes, which is an incredible number. Now, the website gets millions and millions of traffic a day, but before that point, the most downvoted thing of all time was only 24,000 down. So 671,000 and counting. And the hashtag boycott EA has been trending a little bit too, because fans are really upset, I guess, about this game. I probably wouldn't play it anyway. It's a little too expensive for me. So yeah, I know, right? They should pay you for that. I agree. I totally agree. I like PC. Benji's a PC gamer. I used to all the time. Red Alert 2 back in the day when I was a kid. Rainbow Six franchise. You know, I was a game. I'm nerdy now, as everybody knows, with the weather. But back before I started playing more sports, honestly, I would be on the computer a lot. I had a PS2, and I was big into the gaming world in definitely middle school and high school. And then after that, college just kind of took over, and I didn't have as much free time on my hands to kind of game anymore. So that's all I got. Just 5 quick little fun stories that I found. I'll try and do that like every Tuesday, every Thursday. I'm trying to do the T thing, so top 5 Tuesday or top 5 Thursday. Tomorrow, Wisdom will join me at 11. We'll talk football. We all made our football picks, and we bet on Chick-fil-A. We had 4 games that made the difference. We'll go over this tomorrow. But I won 3 of the 4 games, and Wisdom got 3 of the 4 wrong. So I will be enjoying some Chick-fil-A on Wisdom Martin one of these days, and I'll hope that I don't have to get into. I hope I don't have to pay him back the following week. I'll try and get another free meal. Let's see. Don't get back into PC gaming. GPUs are ridiculously expensive. That's true. I'll tell you what. So our weather computers here. A little inside info for you. That's Aaron. Welcome, Aaron. I hadn't seen your comment before. Weather PC's here, and that's a general PC screen. Let me pull up the weather PC that generates this kind of satellite image for us. So again, yay, sunshine's breaking out a little north of DC. But anyway, apparently the graphical needs for this particular image and it's being able to pull in all the satellite data and put it on a map and show it with pretty good resolution. Apparently it's like extreme. I Googled, I went into our weather PC and I like Googled what the graphics card was, and just the graphics card to do those types of graphics is like $3,000. It's absolutely ridiculous how much like graphics cards. GPUs are getting better and better though, Aaron. Let's see, the reason the change is because once people find out the keys, people start to tell others. Oh, the reason for the charge. Yeah, but it's not so much a key for unlocking. You just kind of unlock as you progress in the game. It doesn't show you a key and then you unlock. It's all kind of randomized in the game. Each individual game unlocks it for you. All right, well that's all I got today, guys. Again, we'll do football picks tomorrow. I'm trying to think of something different to do for Thursday, and then Friday we'll do all weather, all update on the weekend, the cold coming, and whether or not we're going to see a snow flurry or not on Sunday. We'll see. Kathy, I believe it was you that said bring the snow. I say bring the snow as well. Let's do it later on next week, or later on this winter anyway for the measurable stuff. If it snows or if it doesn't snow in DC on Sunday, and remember by snow I mean flurries, it won't stick. Period. Ground temp's far too warm. But do we see anything falling? Do we not? We'll figure that out as we head into the week. All right, I'm going to leave you with the image of the satellite picture. Nice talking to you guys, Kathy, Benji, and Aaron. Sorry about the expensive gaming PCs there, Aaron. Oh, that new Xbox I heard is pretty daggone good with how powerful it is compared to gaming PCs. All right, Molly's waiting in the wings here to update you on more serious news and all the stuff I just did. Other than that, guys, have yourselves a great Tuesday. I will see you tomorrow on Wednesday. All right, let's start the music here, and I'll sign off here. We'll get Molly back in, and I will see everybody tomorrow. All right, guys, take care. See you later.
All right, hey guys, Mike was right. I'm back from my little trip out west. So I'm going to be coming on and showing you what's going on inside the newsroom today. We're going to bring a few reporters. Mike's right this time. Yeah, I was out yesterday. He's going home. Hope you enjoyed the weather. Hey, I hope you stay on with us today, guys. Benji, Iran, some of you guys, the regulars, good to see you on. So we're going to be kind of dancing around with what's going on Capitol Hill today. Jeff Sessions is in a big hearing. There's also a huge sexual harassment hearing going on Capitol Hill, which I think is more interesting. We're going to bring you that live and have some people talk about that as well. So I'm just reading. Oh yeah, Benji, you were on last Friday when the police chase was on. That was a really good one. Here, you guys, a little wider view of our newsroom. Friday was interesting because of that. That was an Oklahoma City stolen pickup truck chase that we had on for like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours even for the show. So I'm glad you guys enjoyed that, and I'm glad you guys have stayed on with me. So give me a second, I'm gonna set it all up, and then we're gonna be back with you inside the newsroom, guys.
Command and control system so that there's time for the human element to make the assessments necessary to reach the right decision. We've had too many close calls over the course of the Cold War, but they were avoided in the end by wise human decision.
In some cases, yes, well, I won't go on the details, but so in the 2010 Nuclear Posture Review, is it not the position of the United States that we essentially are saying we would not use a nuclear first strike against an NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty participant who does not have nuclear forces?
I've written an op-ed in the New York Times about this at the time. That's how it was covered in the media, but when you read it closely, I believe it still leaves wiggle room, in particular because it says those countries in compliance with their non-proliferation treaty obligations, and it leaves opaque who determines whether they're in compliance.
All right, y'all, we're coming back inside our newsroom. We're going to go to some tape playback of the president who had some words for the press earlier this morning, so I don't want to miss that. They're going to play that out, and I'm going to play it for you. Benji, thanks for staying on. Some of you guys as regulars, really good to see you. Kathy, hope you guys are having a good day. Like I said, we're going to go over to the sexual harassment presser that was on the Hill today because it's actually pretty interesting. It's super relevant with what people have been talking about today. There's a congresswoman who has, Jackie Spear, who has accused some of sexual harassment in her tenure on the Hill, and there's some other news to kind of come out of this on Capitol Hill. So we're going to talk about that, about preventing sexual harassment and all that, and that all comes out in this hearing. Now, it just happened, so I'm actually going to re-rack it and play it out for you guys. But first, when we have it, we're going to go over to the president and this playback of him with the press this morning.
This is creating hearings and backlogs that were never intended to be part of the system. Did not happen before. And so there's so many things out there that burden our law enforcement officers, make it more difficult, more expensive, more lengthy to complete these things. We've just got to make up our mind. We've got to make up our mind. Do we want a lawful system of immigration that serves the national interest? Or do we want open borders and we're not going to enforce it? Thank you for your leadership, Mr. Smith. I know you'll be leaving this body also, and I've enjoyed so much the honor of working with you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I'm not going to ask any questions, and I'm going to end with that, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back. Thank you.
The Chair, thanks, gentlemen. We're going to take a break, Attorney General session, so the committee will stand in recess for 10 minutes. Thank you.
Hey. All right, roll time.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Not my first hearing. Came in before the witness.
They were delayed 3 hours, as you probably heard. There was a delay for some reason, but we had a lunch, and they let me make my opening, my ending remarks at the lunch, so that was really good. So we're leaving pretty much on time, I think, right? How's that? Pretty much on time?
Yeah, a little early.
Kept us pretty much on time.
Are you proud of the trip?
Very proud of it. From a standpoint of security and safety, military, very proud, and trade, you will see numbers that you won't believe over the years. Because over a period of years, they will be treating us much differently than they have in the past. people were taking advantage, countries were taking advantage of the United States, more than just this region, but the world. And those days are over. We're going to be fair, we're going to be reciprocal. As I said in my remarks before, we will be reciprocal, meaning if they're doing it, we're doing it. And that's the way it's going to be.
So what do you point to one thing that you feel like you accomplished that you got done that you can tell the American people about?
Well, I think we made a lot of progress just in terms of relationship. We actually sold $300 billion worth of equipment and other things. And I think that number is going to be quadrupled very quickly. So that's over $1 trillion worth of stuff. I think we have done a really fantastic job. It's been a great trip. It's also been really good in terms of North Korea and getting everybody together. I think their acts are all together. China has been excellent. Japan and South Korea have been excellent. I think that's a very important part of the trip. And the other important part to me was trade and relationship. The Philippines is an unbelievably important military location because if you speak to the admirals and you speak to the generals, that's a perfect spot. And as you know, we had no relationship for a long period of time in the Philippines, and now we have a very good relationship there. We're back with the Philippines, so strategically we have a very important location, maybe the most important strategic location in that area. So it's good. We had a great time. I hope you guys are all okay. You all look well. Go to sleep for a little while, and we'll be around. We'll talk to you later. The basketball players, by the way, I know a lot of people are asking. I will tell you, when I heard about it 2 days ago, I had a great conversation with President Xi. What they did was unfortunate. You know, you're talking about very long prison sentences. They do not play games. He was terrific, and they're working on it right now, and hopefully everything's going to work out. And I know they're very grateful because they were told exactly what happened. But it's a very, very rough situation with what happened to them. And I was with him. Yes, he is, and he's been terrific. President Xi has been terrific on that subject, but that was not a good subject. That was not something that should have happened. Okay, folks, go rest.
Do you expect Stevens coming home soon?
I hope so.
Can you say what you might announce on Thursday or Wednesday at the White House?
Well, I think we're going to go into details of what I said. Know that from now on, things are going to be reciprocal.
Yeah, guys, looks like we lost that sound for just a second. Now it's back, so sorry about
in
that.
the case of China, we can't do that. We have to have reciprocal trade. What's good for them is good for us.
Why are those relationships so important? And is there a risk of getting too close to President Xi?
No, relationship is always important. It doesn't mean it's necessarily close. It's really a relationship based on respect. To me, a relationship based on respect is much more important than anything else, including friendship, because this is really something they have to respect our country, and they have not respected our country for a long period of time. Thank you all very much. Have a good time. Thank you. This morning, but meetings all the time, and it was really terrific. But those were your statements you wanted to know, you wanted to see. Okay? Thank you, sir. Make sure she gets them to you.
Well, I was trying to wrestle them away.
I know you.
All right, guys, so a little choppy video there, but that was President Trump talking to the press this morning, just as he's winding down that trip to Asia, as we've been kind of tracking for the past week. Now, in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you see just a view of inside the House Justice Committee on Capitol Hill. The Attorney General Sessions is back on Capitol Hill for a hearing. He's likely to face a lot of questions about Trump, his campaign contacts with Russia, and all that stuff. So that looks like it's on a break right now. We're going to queue up that really anticipated sexual harassment press conference on Capitol Hill, and we'll have Tom Fitzgerald in here to talk more about that because he's covering it today. But let's queue that up so we can watch some of that from earlier this morning. This just ended.
staff are trained and have better training. And we need to ensure that we are protecting the victims of harassment when it does occur. Sexual harassment is strictly prohibited by our Code of Official Conduct. Let me repeat that. Sexual harassment is strictly prohibited by the House's Code of Official Conduct, and something that the House Ethics Committee takes very seriously. For background, at the House Ethics Committee, we have two separate functions as they relate to sexual harassment. First, we have an Advice and Education Division. The attorneys in Advice and Education are trained when approached with a harassment issue to advise the person seeking advice to contact Office of Compliance. These discussions with our attorneys on our committee are strictly confidential, so I cannot report on the number of harassment instances raised with the committee. But I can report that the advice given is to educate the advice seeker on their options. The second function of our committee is to conduct investigations when allegations are made. And should someone be interested in initiating an investigation, they can contact the House Ethics Committee Investigation Division. The committee and I personally share this committee's goal of protecting victims of harassment. I look forward to learning from this hearing ways we can improve the House generally and how we can ensure that we take the lessons learned from today's hearing and improve the House Ethics Committee processes as well. And in closing, I would like to just commend the three female members here who've just shared, and as we've learned, all started as staffers. And it's very important, and I'm just pleased to be a part of this today. I was not a staffer here on the Hill, had never worked on the Hill prior to coming to Congress, but I think it's very powerful that the three of you who are here in many ways representing House staff and now as strong voices on behalf of not only your districts, but on behalf of the country as members. So thank you, and I yield back.
Congresswoman Brooks yields back. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, for the purposes of an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Brady, thank you very much for calling this hearing, and I also want to thank our distinguished witnesses for their leadership and perseverance in dealing with this issue. The nation is in an uproar today over sexual assault and sexual harassment. From the studios of liberal Hollywood to the studios of Fox News, from Wall Street to Alabama, there is a tectonic taking place in women's unwillingness to put up with what prior generations of women were often forced to accept. Alabama, there is a tectonic shift taking place in women's unwillingness to put up with what prior generations of women were often forced to accept as business as usual. And I believe that generally enough too wants action. In Congress, we must be leaders in changing a culture of sexual harassment and assault, not just by what we say in our legislation, but by what we do in our own workplace. Justice Brown once said, "Our government is a potent, omnipresent teacher, for good or for ill. He teaches the whole people by example." Mr. Chairman, sexual harassment at work is a pervasive problem that documented. The EEOC estimated that anywhere from 25% to 85% of women have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. And let's be clear that it is illegal. It takes the form of pro quo sexual harassment or hostile workplace environment harassment. It constitutes sex discrimination, and it degrades the professional status and social position of women. To think that this body is somehow immune from sexual harassment and abuse of women would be naive at best. At last count, more than 1,500 former staffers signed a petition directly calling on us to reform policies aimed at preventing sexual harassment and advocating complaints. My chief of staff, Julie Tagan, who's most of her here on Capitol Hill, says she does not know a single woman in her age group who has not experienced inappropriate conduct in the workplace. Because businesses across
Guys, obviously we're having a little trouble with this video feed, so I'm going to make sure we get a clean copy of it to play back later, because I think this is the most interesting thing to come up today. But looks like right now we have the Attorney General Sessions hearing coming back into session. This is live on Capitol Hill, so I'm going to queue up a clean copy of this to play that later. So stay with us for that, and a little more insight about that from inside our newsroom as well. We're going to bring over Tom Fitzgerald, who's going to chat about it, and he's covering it today. But let's go over live to these couple of feeds that I have from the Hill before we come back into the newsroom and chat a little more of what's going on inside, and go to this hearing for where the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, is back on Capitol Hill to talk about the Department of Justice.
Fired Comey. On May 11th, he went on television and announced that he fired Comey because of, and I quote again, the Russia thing with Trump and Russia, close quote. General Sessions, do you think it would be reasonable for the members of this committee to conclude that the president, by first interfering in one investigation and then interfering in an investigation into himself, committed obstruction of justice?
I don't believe that's a fair conclusion, and but it's a matter that I guess would be in the breast of the special counsel.
The obstruction of justice being any, among other definitions, the most popular one in statute, any communication that endeavors to influence, obstruct, or impede the due administration of justice. That's exactly what the president did in both of those cases. And in spite of, moving on to the special counsel that you brought up, in spite of efforts, bipartisan efforts to protect the special counsel, Mr. Mueller, the Republican leadership in this committee have refused to take action to ensure that he's protected. Do you believe that the president has the legal authority to fire special counsel Mueller?
I'm not able to express an opinion on that at this
Can he
moment.
fire members of the special counsel's team?
I'm not able to answer that.
General Sessions, do you believe that the president should have the authority to be able to block investigations into his own campaign?
Investigations have to be conducted by the appropriate law enforcement officers without fear and favor, without politics or bias.
Right, and without fear of being dismissed by the president in order to block that investigation, because again, that would certainly appear to represent obstruction of justice. And when you fail to acknowledge that, it is essentially a green light to the president to go ahead and do that. And now I wanted to talk about the special counsel's investigation. Thus far, there have been some indictments. There's a guilty plea. Can you tell me, in your opinion, does the president have the power to pardon George Papadopoulos?
It would be premature for me to comment on that, I believe.
Because?
The president has power to pardon. There's no doubt about that.
Right. Does he have the power to pardon Paul Manafort and Rick Gates ahead of a trial and a conviction?
I'm not able to comment on that. I haven't researched that question. I think it's settled, maybe settled law, but I'm not.
What do you think the settled law is?
I don't know.
And does he have the power to pardon Michael Flynn, any other member of the Trump campaign? Let me ask you this. Does the president have the power to pardon his own family members? Could the president today pardon Donald Trump Jr. for, among other things, being in contact with WikiLeaks regarding these emails? Can he make those pardons today before there's anything further that comes from the special counsel's investigation?
I would not be able to answer that at this moment with any authority.
General Sessions, you started by telling us that you're the American people's lawyer. Now, you're not recused from giving us answers on these. You're not comfortable giving us answers on these. But here's the problem that we have. You said when you started your testimony today that there is nothing more important than advancing the rule of law. And when you answer the way you have, it suggests that the rule of law is crumbling at our feet. You took an oath to uphold the Constitution. We took an oath to uphold the Constitution. And while members of this committee and the majority may choose to abdicate their responsibility with regard to these very important matters, you cannot. And the interference, what you've told us today in just this exchange, what we should all be concerned about is another Saturday Night Massacre. If you can't tell us that the president shouldn't fire or can fire the special counsel and everyone who works for him. We should be worried if you're telling us that the president may be able to pardon in advance all of those who are being investigated. We should be worried about the pursuit of the rule of law. General Sessions, again, we may in this committee.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The Attorney General can respond if he chooses
Well,
to do so.
just briefly, one of the things, if you respect the rule of law, is the Attorney General should not be giving legal opinions from the seat of his britches. So you need to be careful about that, and that's what I'm saying to you today.
I do appreciate that, General Sessions. These are not new issues that I would think require you to give these opinions from the rule of your britches.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sessions, I'm over here on this side. If pursuant to a warrant, there is a wiretap, conversation is seized under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and the one person is a foreign agent, the other person is an American citizen, is the release of the information regarding who the American citizen is and or the conversation of the American citizen a violation of federal law?
I believe it is.
And if somebody releases that information,
maybe factual distinctions.
I know,
I
think
think
hypothetical. Somebody releases the information of the name of that person and or the information contained by that person, that is a federal offense.
Unacceptable, and it could be a federal offense.
So has anybody been prosecuted under your regime for doing that, whether it's been in the White House or some other government agency where we hear about leaks of classified information? Are you prosecuting anybody for that?
For release of FISA-obtained information.
Release of the information of who the American is and or the conversation by the American. That's classified information. Is your department investigating anybody for that?
I cannot confirm or deny the existence of an investigation.
Are you prosecuting anybody for that?
Nobody is under indictment, although we've got at least 4 indictments this year of leaks of classified information, and we will continue to press those cases.
All right, good. We want to talk about the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Secret courts issuing secret warrants to get information on terrorists overseas. That's generally the purpose of the FISA law and FISA courts. Will you agree with that?
Well, that's not a perfect summary, but it's got
short
substance to it.
It's too short. We know we can't trust the NSA. James Clacker testified before this committee in 2013 that the NSA was not spying on Americans. Then all of a sudden, this guy named Snowden showed up, and we found out, whether I don't like Snowden at all, he ought to be prosecuted, I think. But anyway, we learned that the American public was being spied on by the NSA. Part of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act gives the NSA authority to seize information like emails, text messages, communications by these bad guys, foreign agents or terrorists overseas, to collect their information to make sure that America is safe. During that process, as you know, they call it incidental information. Information on Americans, who they are, and what those conversations may be, is also seized. The NSA says that's incidental information. Now, it's my understanding the Justice Department is opposed to the USA Liberty Act, which would require that before government goes into that information on Americans, when they're not the target's these terrorists, goes into that information on Americans, that there has to be a warrant signed by a real judge that states probable cause before that information can be seized. Now, my understanding is the Justice Department, under your leadership, is opposed to that warrant requirement. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
So, you're a former judge.
Would-be judge.
Pardon?
A would-be judge.
Yeah, I want to be judge, yeah. I'm a former judge, too. You don't think probable cause and a warrant requirement is required to go into that information that is, first of all, the seizure is done by government without a warrant. So it's seized already. And before it can be then searched, you also don't require or believe that a warrant should be required by any court to go into that information?
Well,
I'm just asking the same question.
The courts have so held.
I'm not asking that question.
Well, I agree with the courts.
No, you agree
not
with
you,
the courts.
Congressman, on that. You get lawfully
Don't you think
obtained
that
records, documents.
Reclaiming my time.
All right.
You agree with the courts on that, not me. But let me tell you something. It is the responsibility of Congress to set the privacy standard for Americans.
That is
my
correct.
personal opinion, and I think the Constitution supports it, that before government can go in and see something and then search it on an American citizen that's incidental to the search on the target, government should get a warrant for that conduct. That's spying on Americans. And we know that we can't trust the NSA to keep from doing that. Is that data ever destroyed on Americans? Or is it kept forever?
I believe it has definitely has a limited time span, and I think it's 5 years.
So Americans shouldn't be concerned that information is being collected on them and searched, and we don't have any say-so about a
Has
warrant.
expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Gutierrez, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, before I begin, I think I have a solution that could allow the committee to move on to other important national matters like gun control and immigration. Your side clearly wants an investigation of Hillary Clinton, and our side has been begging for months to hold hearings and start an investigation of the Trump administration and campaign's improper ties to Mr. Putin and the Russian government. My solution would save the American taxpayers a lot of grief and a lot of money by eliminating the need for the investigations. I propose we simply go to the president and the former Secretary of State and ask them both to resign. I'll go to Hillary Clinton, you can go to Donald Trump, and we'll say them both to resign. Then we can move on as a nation from an election that just never seems to end. Now, I did Google organizations that Hillary Clinton leads, and it came out 0. So I'm not quite sure what you're going to get her to resign from, because she doesn't appear to be in charge of anything. Last time I checked, she got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump, but she lost the election. So I don't know, why don't we move on and really look at the nation? So, Attorney General, I'd like to ask you, you said earlier today it was a brilliant campaign, referring to the Donald Trump campaign. Is that true? You feel that?
It was a remarkable thing that overcame a lot of obstacles.
Brilliant campaign.
When
Now,
people couldn't have.
in campaigns, candidates make promises during campaigns. You think candidates should fulfill the promises they make during campaigns?
People make a lot of promises, and
You think they should fulfill those promises? It was a brilliant campaign,
honor your
remarkable
promise.
campaign. And as a member of the cabinet of President Trump, do you feel an obligation to fulfill those campaign promises? I mean, when he asked you to come on, did you think you should fulfill the campaign promises?
I believe the Attorney General should enforce the law first
I
and
understand
foremost.
enforce the law, but he said you're helping him on the Muslim ban, on immigration issue. I mean, you think he should fulfill
President
those
makes
promises?
decisions, and if it's lawful, we defend it.
If it's lawful, Okay, I like that if it's lawful. But you said it was a remarkable and brilliant campaign. He said, quote, during the second debate, if I win, I'm going to instruct my Attorney General, that would be you, because he chose you, to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation, referring to Hillary Clinton, because there's never been so many lies, so much deception, end quote. And when Hillary Clinton responded, she said, because you'd be in jail. Are you going to fulfill that campaign promise that he made during the second debate? Because he did say he'd put her in jail. He said he asked the Attorney General, you, to set a special project. That's what he said. It's a quote. I didn't make it up. What do you say? Are you going to keep that campaign promise?
I'll fulfill my responsibilities.
Are you going to keep the campaign promise? That's a yes or no. It's a promise that your boss, he hired you to fulfill. Are you going to fulfill?
We will comply with the law with regard to special prosecutor appointments.
Are you going to appoint one, as he promised during the campaign? He's reminded you a couple of times in a few of his tweets that that's what he wants you to do.
I'll fulfill my duty as Attorney General.
Okay. So the brilliant campaign, remarkable campaign, big smile on your face. You love the campaign, but you're not going to fulfill his campaign promises. I hope you don't in this particular case. So I'm kind of happy with your answer up to now. So as Mr. Attorney General, I'm going to ask you another series of questions. And I'd like to go back to the beginning of the hearing and get you to answer the following question. Are you aware that you are under oath and that your answers must be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, Mr. Attorney General?
I'm aware of that.
Okay, good. So I brought this little salt shaker here, and you'll forgive me if I just put a little bit of doubt into that answer. And just to remind myself that I might need this. And I ask unanimous consent that this article from Mother Jones Magazine be entered into the record with the headline, 3 times Jeff Sessions made false statements under oath to Congress. I ask this because I don't want to hear in a few days or in a few weeks that your answers, Mr. Attorney General, have changed based on newly uncovered evidence that what you told us before was in fact false, misleading, or something other than the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I ask unanimous consent.
That objection be made a part of the record.
Thank you. Under oath in the Senate, you said as a surrogate, quote, a time or two for the Trump campaign, you did not have communication with Russians, but in March it was revealed you did. Did you have campaign communications with the Russians? Because it appears you have had campaign communications with the Russians, Mr. Attorney General.
That is, I'd like to respond to that. I thought I had the paper right here. Surely I do. Here it is. Mr. Chairman, take a couple of minutes. I'd like to respond to that. Colleagues, I guess say former colleagues.
They left.
Senator Franken asked me this question. Okay, CNN has just published a story, and I'm telling you about a news story that's just been published. I'm not expecting you to know whether or not it's true, but CNN just published a story alleging that the intelligence community of the United States of America, the intelligence community provided documents to the president-elect last week that included information that, quote, Russian operatives claim to have compromising personal and financial information about Mr. Trump, close quote. These documents also allegedly say, quote, there was a continuing exchange of information during the campaign between Trump's surrogates and intermediaries for the Russian government, close quote. He goes on to say, now again, I'm telling you this is all coming out, so you know, but if it's true, it's obviously extremely serious, and if there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do? I was taken aback by this. I'd never heard of this. This happened while I was testifying, I suppose. And I said, Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate a time or two in the campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians. I'm unable to comment on it.
And you're not going to correct that today?
My answer was responsive to his charge about a continuing...
But do you want to correct it or clarify it today for us?
The time of the gentleman has expired. The Attorney General can answer the question, but then we're moving on.
So this is really important. I appreciate the opportunity to share it. So my focus was on responding to the concern that I, as a surrogate, was participating in a continuing series of meetings with intermediaries for the Russian government. And I certainly didn't mean I'd never met a Russian in the history of my life. So I didn't think it was responsive, and my response was, according to the way I heard the question, as honestly I could give it at the time. I hope you'll treat me fairly when you evaluate that.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Marino, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, General, for being here. I appreciate it. I'm going to ask you some questions because I am the chairman of the Regulatory Reform and Antitrust Subcommittee on Judiciary. And antitrust is an issue that is now surfacing more so than it ever has in the past. And the Justice Department's role is very critical in antitrust issues to determine whether there is an antitrust violation. I understand that the Justice Department's position on the AT&T merger will require divestment of some assets. Behavioral conditions have been used in vertical mergers since they pose a lesser danger to competition than horizontal mergers. Is the structural condition in vertical mergers a policy for DOJ at this point?
Antitrust policy is important. I've never been an expert at it. It was one subcommittee of the Judiciary I never chose to be a part of. But we have an experienced team in the Department of Justice.
Hey guys, hey Benji, hey everybody who's on. Just kind of reiterating what you're watching right now. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, he's back on the Hill today testifying before the House Judiciary Committee, and he's getting pretty hard pressed by some of these Republican House members, of course talking more about if there should be a special counsel appointed to investigate Hillary Clinton. He said looks like is not enough to actually go forward with that, so lots of questions in that regard, but I'm going to pull back up the volume so you can hear more of what's going on inside this this chamber here on Capitol Hill, and then we're going to bring over to back to the newsroom to kind of chat a little more about sexual harassment and go over to the sexual harassment presser from this morning, which I think is pretty interesting. So stay with us for that.
Well, the vertical horizontal issue is something that has always been part of the discussion. I don't think it's dispositive of any final decision, but I'm really not able at this time to comment on anything that would be part of an ongoing matter.
Understand.
And I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to not attempt to answer that.
I'm going to switch to human trafficking now. When I was a U.S. attorney, we handled some very heartbreaking and very severe situations concerning human trafficking. And I know that you understand, like I understand, the challenges involved there. But what can you tell me what DOJ has done in upping the prosecutions and the investigations for anti-trafficking?
We believe strongly that we can do even more. It's been a priority for a number of years. I was recently in the Minnesota United States Attorney's Office. They had a major international case, and I was surprised how much money was involved, almost as much as drug dealers may make. We have a recent report of our people meeting with the child exploitation group. My Associate Attorney General, number 3, Rachel Brand, is very interested in this, and I've empowered her to be engaged in advancing our efforts in this regard, and she's enthusiastically responding to that.
If I may make a suggestion as well, several years ago, we in the Middle District of Pennsylvania prosecuted one of the biggest sex trafficking cases on the East Coast, obviously, for the most part, involving women and very young girls. We had a good conviction. These people went away for 30 or 40 years. But one of the areas that we have to help more with the victims is the protection side of things. Of course, during the investigation and during the trial, but subsequent to the convictions, that these women and children aren't forgotten, and there are protections there to keep them from anybody else attempting to do what's been done in the past. And I thank you so very much for your service to us, and I yield back.
Thank you for your service.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Bass, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Between 1956 and 1971, the FBI ran a counterintelligence program named COINTELPRO that was initiated by J. Edgar Hoover. COINTELPRO mainly targeted civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King, and it's commonly understood that this was an abuse of its surveillance power in a manner to suppress a peaceful movement. So I would like to ask, Mr. Chair, unanimous consent to enter this report into the record, which is Black identity extremists likely motivated to target law enforcement officers. I believe earlier you said you were not familiar with the report. Is that correct?
Well, I haven't read it. I know some of the alleged targeting of officers by
Okay, so I
certain
would
group.
like to know, and I'll ask you about that in a minute. So you are somewhat familiar with it. Who had the power in your department to order a report like this?
I'm not sure how that report got ordered. I don't believe I explicitly approved it or directed it.
Okay, so you haven't necessarily read the report, but you are familiar with the term black identity extremists?
Well, I think so, yes.
So can you tell me what that term means to you? Do you believe that there is a movement of African Americans that identify themselves as black identity extremists, and what does that movement do?
Well, it'd be interesting to see the conclusions of that report, but I'm aware that there are groups that do have an extraordinary commitment to their racial identity, and some have transformed themselves even into violent activists.
Are you aware of white organizations that do this as well? Given that white supremacy is well-documented, well-researched movements such as the neo-Nazis, the Ku Klux Klan, et cetera, are they white identity extremists?
I didn't follow that question, please, again.
Is there a term or a report on white identity extremists? You mentioned you were familiar with black people who identify with their racial identity.
Yes, but it's not coming to me at this moment.
Not coming to you?
It's
certainly a group such as the Ku Klux Klan.
Yes, and then the skinhead movements, but there's a racial identity white movements that have been identified for sure.
So has the FBI done a report on white identity extremists that are likely motivated to target law enforcement officers? Is there such
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Are you aware of a group called the Sovereign Citizens?
I've heard that group, yes.
And I believe that the Sovereign Citizens is primarily a white organization that absolutely has targeted police officers and killed police officers. You're not aware of that?
I'm not aware of all their crimes, but I know they're a group that's known to have violent tendencies.
Could you name an African-American organization that have committed violent acts against police officers? Could you name one today? In this report, they name organizations from 30, 40 years ago, but can you name of one today that has targeted police officers in a violent manner?
I believe I could, but I would want to be, to confirm that and submit it to you in writing. But I believe we had, within the last year or so, 4 police officers killed by a group that some have described as extremists.
So what has happened is that there have been a couple of incidents in which African Americans did kill police officers who were not associated with a black organization. And so one, for example, in Baton Rouge was associated with Sovereign Citizens, which is primarily a white group. So you should know that there's a lot of concern in the community, especially from organizations such as Black Lives Matter. By the way, would you consider Black Lives Matter a black identity extremist group?
I'm not able to comment on that. I have not so declared it.
So you should know that a lot of activists around the country are very concerned that we're getting ready to repeat a very sad chapter of our history, where people who are rightfully protesting what they consider to be an injustice in their community, which is their relationship with police officers, are now being targeted and labeled as extremists and are going through periods of surveillance and harassment. And so I would like to know, what is your department going to do to protect the rights of average citizens to protest if they have a concern about police officers?
This department will not unlawfully target people.
So if that's the case, then I would ask that you review this report, Black Identity Extremists Likely Motivated to Target Law Enforcement Officers, because I personally don't believe that any such organizations exist. The organizations that are referred to in this report are organizations from decades ago. And so I would like to know, what will you do to essentially roll back what is listed in this report? Because it's not accurate. Sir?
We will look at the report. I actually would be interested in reading it. But they usually do an excellent job, objective and fair, on those kind of reports.
Okay, well, just...
Time of the gentlewoman has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I want to cover a couple of areas, but I want to start with something that's very important to me. I think it's important to all people in this country have good conscience, irrespective of their political ideation, and that is the independence of the Department of Justice. And in my judgment, 2016 and 2017 have been challenging for the Department of Justice. The decision to charge someone carries with it multiple layers of review. There's a grand jury, there's a petit jury, there's a trial judge, there are post-trial motions, there's appellate courts, there are courts of habeas corpus, and then there's the media, and then there's Congress. But the decision not to charge someone does not carry with it the same corresponding layers of review. But in some instances, it's every bit as important to understand why law enforcement did not do something and why prosecutors did not do something. I'm not interested in relitigating the FBI's decision not to charge Secretary Clinton. That decision's been made, it's been explained, and I'm not interested in relitigating it. I am, however, interested in reviewing 2016 and 2017 with respect to the Department of Justice. And Mr. Attorney General, there was a time when my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were interested in having some of these questions answered as well. It wasn't a year ago that some of my Democrat friends wanted Jim Comey investigated and prosecuted for a Hatch Act violation. That was 12 months ago. And it was absurd then, and it's absurd now. But what's not absurd is when my Democrat colleagues ask, why did you decide to publicize one investigation but not another? Why did you decide to appropriate a decision away from the Justice Department, which is very unusual for the head of the FBI to serve as both the investigator and the decision maker? Just like Republicans wanted to know, Mr. Comey, did you reach your conclusions before the end of the investigation? Did you make decisions whether to charge or not to charge before you interviewed all of the witnesses? These are questions that, to me, go to the core of whether or not the department can be respected, separate and aside from politics. I mean, I guess that certain departments are just inherently political, but the Department of Justice should not be. And so I tell you that up front, that Chairman Goodlatte and I are going to be looking into the decisions made in 2016 and 2017. And I think I can speak for him, and I know I can speak for myself. My motivation is a love for that department and a love for the concept of blind justice that doesn't care whether it's an even-numbered year or an odd-numbered year. And to the extent that there were decisions made, including the decision to write a public letter in October of last year and follow that up with another public letter in November, those are legitimate questions, and I hope that the department will cooperate both with respect to making witnesses available, but also with respect to documents so Congress can better understand the decisions that were made and not made and restore some modicum of trust that all people, whether they agreed with the decisions or not, at least understand why they were made. Now, Mr. Conyers asked you whether or not it was appropriate for the president
Could I respond just briefly to that?
Yes, sir.
You're familiar with the Inspector General.
I'm meeting with him.
And they make public their investigations. And several of the matters that involve the FBI are in the full and intense review by the Inspector General, and perhaps they can, under their rules of disclosure, perhaps you can inquire more about how that's ongoing. But I'm not able to give the details to you at this time. That's a serious matter. It's in my response to the chairman of yesterday.
Well, I didn't intend to ask you to respond to it because you're right. Mr. Horowitz is looking into it. In fact, I'm meeting with Mr. Horowitz this afternoon, not in that capacity, but in another. And you're right. At some point, he's going to let Congress know what he found, but that does not absolve us of our responsibility to also look into it. Mr. Conyers asked you whether or not it was appropriate for the president to weigh in an ongoing investigation. And of course, the answer to that is no. It is not appropriate. It's not appropriate in 2017. It wasn't appropriate when President Obama did it in the IRS targeting scandal. It wasn't appropriate when President Obama did it in the ongoing investigation into Hillary Clinton's server. It is never appropriate for a president to tell a Department of Justice what outcome it should reach. I just wish my friends on the other side had the same outrage when President Obama did it as they do now. I mean, I guess that's what this will be my last question to you. You're nominated by a president. You're approved by a Senate, but yet you work for a virtue. You work for a blindfolded woman holding a set of scales, and that is what makes our culture different. How do you restore people's trust, Republicans and Democrats, confidence in a Department of Justice when it seems like different rules apply depending on who's in power?
The time of the gentleman has expired. The Attorney General will be permitted to answer.
Well, it's a good question and an important question. We intend to do our work according to the established principles of the Department of Justice. We will not be infected by politics or bias. We will make only decisions we believe are right and just, and we're not going to use the department to unlawfully advance a political agenda. We're going to enforce the laws of this country effectively as Congress has passed them, and I am determined that when the years go by, that people will say this Department of Justice did not crumble. It stayed firm and true to the great principles that I was taught in the 15 years I served in the Department of Justice, 2.5 as an assistant, 12 as United States Attorney, and looking up to the Attorney General is somehow so far removed from me that it was beyond recognition. But now I'm in that position. I think I understand the gravity of it. I think I understand the importance of responding to your question, and we'll do our best.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Richmond, for 5 minutes.
Mr. General, I have the honor of serving as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. You were not there, but I'm sure you are aware, and if you're not aware, I'm telling on myself, that I testified against your nomination. And I did so because I was afraid that we would go back to a time where discrimination was rampant and that diversity was not appreciated and that the right to vote for minorities and African Americans would be further, more obstacles would be set up. And I listened to your opening statement and I listened to your remarks since then, and you talked about voter ID. The VC case, which in Texas ruled that their Texas voter identification law had discriminatory portions against African Americans. The district court ruled that way, the appellate court affirmed that ruling, and then you withdrew from the case after 2 courts ruled that it was discriminatory. How does that mesh, and then argued on the side of Texas, how does that mesh with the right to make sure that African Americans had unfettered access to the voting polls?
Congressman, the way that happened was that Texas had passed a voter ID law that the courts did not approve but struck down. Election was coming up, I believe, and the court approved a voter ID procedure that they approved for that election, and the Texas legislature then repealed its previous law that had been found to be unconstitutional or improper and passed the one that the court had approved. So we felt that the voter ID law has been approved. A proper voter ID law is constitutional, and we believe that one is constitutional, and that's why the position was changed.
And also in judging Department of Justice, in terms of nominating judges to the bench, our information tells us that out of all the judges that have been nominated, I think 91% have been white males. Does that foster diversity?
I'm not aware of the numbers, but you should look for quality candidates, and I think diversity is a matter that has significance.
Well, the National Bar Association could recommend and has recommended a number of African American and other minority attorneys who are qualified. So let me just ask you, and if you don't know the answer to these, just let me know that you'll get me the information. But how many African Americans do you have on your senior staff?
I do not have a senior staff member at this time. that's an African American.
Out of all
I would note in Alabama, I participated in recommending an African American judge, and I've had judges before, and
we're talking about this administration, though. Of all of the U.S. attorneys that have been nominated or confirmed, how many have been African American?
One in Alabama.
All right, guys, so this hearing continues here on Capitol Hill. If you're just joining us or you're watching with us, the Attorney General is back on Capitol Hill to chat and testify before the House Judiciary Committee. But I'm also getting a live source in right now down in San Antonio, and I want to bring you guys over there to the lawsuit that's coming out of that church shooting, and there is someone speaking about that right now. So I'm going to jump down there, and then we'll come back inside the newsroom for a little chat with some more people here. I know our reporter Tom, who I want to chat with about the sexual harassment press conference and all the news coming out about that on Capitol Hill. He had to go out on his story to try to catch Barbara Comstock to talk to her. The news there coming out that she knew of a young female staffer who went over at the request of the member that she was working for, to his house, and he greeted her in a towel and then exposed himself. So lots of new stuff coming out on sexual harassment on Capitol Hill. In the wake of all this news from Hollywood, of course, that has just sort of started this chain reaction effect of people coming forward about this topic. So we'll play out that presser in a little bit. I'm going to jump over to this church shooting lawsuit presser now down in San Antonio.
Legally required mandate to report this type of crime to this database. And so with regard to the government and their ability to argue immunity, it could very well be a case that is decided in the courts, and whether or not the government should or shouldn't be immune.
What are your plans specifically? Obviously, as an attorney, people would expect you to file suit against a body or an individual. Is that the next step, or are you just encouraging action to take place in Congress?
I am encouraging our government to quickly figure out how many people in this country have a conviction that is not in this national data bank that would prevent them from buying a firearm. This particular tragedy absolutely needs to put full pressure on our government to not decide next year and 2 years what's missing from that database, but right now, because every day that that's not adequately reported, there could be another person like what happened here at this Baptist church out there on the road, on the streets, buying a firearm and having another tragedy.
So you're not anticipating filing a suit?
I think that whether or not we file suits in the future, it's going to depend a lot on, one, the individuals that may or may not want to be involved in that type of process. Two, in the federal court system, in a federal claim, you don't file suit immediately. It's actually a claim, and the government is allowed to have time to respond to that claim. And it may be a very important first step for the government to reach out to these victims and through a claims process be able to ensure that they are adequately protected and compensated by the government for the government's complete failure. And but for the government's complete failure, this ATF form that was filled out by this Mr. Kelly, it would have been obvious that it was done improperly, illegally, and he should have been prevented from having these firearms. So these particular victims should have an opportunity, even without the benefit of attorneys, to have the government come to them and be responsive to them and responsible to them to help them.
So what I hear you saying is that, as you know, these families are still burying people. It is too soon for them to come to you and say, yes, definitively, let's do something. They're just getting the process started, asking questions.
I think a lot of them, of course, are asking that, and I really think that it's a good time for the government to reach out to the families and to be there during this period of time, so that the grieving process that they're going through, that they can receive help for that from the government, that they can get assurances from the government that there's going to be a change, and that they can help them with all the different financial obligations they're going to have since they've suffered this loss. It really shouldn't require a lawyer to get involved. The government on their own should be stepping up and being responsible.
If the government doesn't step up, will you get involved?
Absolutely, I would be involved.
Have any of the victims said that they're interested in your services?
In terms of discussing victims, I will just say that we've had inquiries, and to go further into specifically what those are, I wouldn't elaborate with you.
I hear you talking a lot about the government, not about gun manufacturers.
I apologize.
I hear you talking a lot about the government, but not gun manufacturers. I'm just wondering, it sounds like you're already kind of laying out a strategy.
Well, I think that certainly we have all heard about gun manufacturers and these weapons that certainly are used in an offensive way, beyond hunting, beyond sporting, and so this particular press conference really isn't about the gun manufacturing business, but certainly they are a large issue in our country, and without these types of semi-automatic weapons being available, I mean, you don't have the potential for these mass shootings.
Any other questions? Thank you, folks. You want Mr. Henry one-on-one before he unmics?
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay, all right.
All right, guys, so a quick press conference down there in San Antonio. We try to bring you the most stuff that we can live and breaking, and then, of course, play back some of the special things that happen in the morning and other interesting topics that we have for you on this midday show. So, of course, first and foremost is anything that's breaking, anything that's live, and that was a live source. Also, what you see right now, live inside the chambers there of that Jeff Sessions hearing. I think some of you guys were kind of interested in that, so we can go back to that in a little bit, but I do want to show you something really interesting too. Let's change gears totally. These are some pictures inside the newest attraction in DC, guys, and it's called the Museum of the Bible. It officially opens this weekend, but this week has been sort of a sneak peek. We had one of our photojournalists there this morning to get some footage of it, and it's really an awesome thing. It's using cutting edge technology to really bring what they're saying is the Bible to life. There's 3,100 items on display, including some fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm going to try to flip through some of these pictures. And these are some of the pictures that we were privy to from inside. And of course, you can kind of see, some people are saying it's kind of ornate and sort of outdone. And I don't know, I've even heard the word cheesy, but I think it looks pretty cool. It's right there on the mall. And so if you guys are local, or you're just interested in it, that's the newest attraction really here in DC. So they have a recreation of the roads that Jesus walked on in Nazareth. There's a ride. I'm just reading some more about it here, but just kind of a neat little thing to share with you guys in the arts world, in the museum world of DC. And apparently the sort of opening of it, the main structure is these huge bronze doors that have the printing plate of the first page of Genesis, or the first chapter, I guess, of Genesis from the Gutenberg Bible, and it opens up into this entry hall. So that's what you have to see, guys, if you are stopping through DC or have it on your list. I'm definitely interested in it. I know we're going to get more of a sneak peek and do sort of a package on it, a little more of a thorough examination of what it has to offer, but kind of a cool look, guys. The Museum of the Bible opening on Friday, grand opening on the mall. All right, we're going to go back to Jeff Sessions' hearing, guys. This is live on Capitol Hill. Let me know what you're thinking about, what you want to see. If you have any thoughts or questions, we'll try to have some more people in and around the newsroom jumping on the show today. And I do want to also go back to that sexual harassment press conference, which we've been tracking because we're about to kind of see, I see one tape coming in from earlier this morning, Barbara Comstock, who made that claim that she knew a young female staffer who was preyed upon by a male Congress member. She is going to speak more about that. And I know our reporter Fitz is going to be talking to her today. So I'm going to jump over there when I have it.
So I guess I would say to you, watch what we do. We're not going to be driven by politics. We're going to try to do the right thing. And I believe that time will show that to be true.
I see my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Jeffries, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Sessions, I have a copy of the transcript of your testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee in October. You stated under oath, "I don't recall," in some form or fashion 29 times. Is that correct?
I have no idea.
I have a copy of the transcript of your testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee in June. You stated under oath, "I don't recall," in some form or fashion approximately 36 times. Is that correct?
I don't know.
In your testimony today, you have stated, "I don't recall," at least 20 times. Is that fair to say?
I have no idea.
Now, on October 4th, 2016, during a TV interview with Lou Dobbs, you criticized Hillary Clinton for telling FBI investigators, "I can't remember," approximately 35 times. You also stated during that Lou Dobbs interview that the intentional failure to remember can constitute perjury. Mr. Attorney General, do you still believe that the intentional failure to remember can constitute a criminal act?
If it's an act to deceive, yes.
Okay. Now, you testified in January that you had no contact with Russian operatives during the Trump campaign. Earlier today, you testified that your story has, quote, "never changed." Is that correct? That was your testimony earlier today, that your story has never changed, correct?
I believe that's fair to say.
Okay.
We've added things that I did not recall at the time.
Right.
So my statement at the time was my best recollection of the circumstances, and as things are brought up.
Claiming my time, I understand.
All right.
Sir, you now acknowledge meeting with Ambassador Kislyak during the Republican National Convention, correct?
I remember I made a speech. He came up to me afterwards. I was standing in front of the speaker program and did chat with him.
Okay, thank you. And you
also
also
not a meeting. It was just an encounter at that time.
Okay, and you also met with the ambassador in September of 2016 in your office, as you've acknowledged, correct?
He asked for an appointment. I had two senior staffers, both full colonels in the United States Army, retired in,
now, you
in the meeting with.
You testified in June before the Senate Intelligence Committee that you had not heard even a whisper about possible Russian involvement in the Trump campaign. Yet we understand that you attended this March 31st meeting where George Papadopoulos talked about potential communications with Russian operatives. But also, according to your third quarter 2016 FEC filing, you hosted a Trump campaign dinner meeting on June 30th, 2016 at the Capitol Hill Club. Is that right?
That's correct, I believe.
And your Senate reelection campaign paid for that meeting. Is that right?
I think that may be so.
Okay, and Carter Page and George Papadopoulos both attended that June 30th meeting, correct?
That has been reported.
And at that meeting, Carter Page told you that he was going to Moscow in a few days. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And he,
thank you.
He said it was a brief meeting as he was walking out the door. I don't recall that conversation, but I'm not able to dispute it.
Understood. Reclaiming my time, I've got limited time available.
That is not, does that establish some sort of improper contact?
I think
with
you understand.
Russians?
I think you understand.
He's not Russian either.
You understand, sir. I get to ask the questions. You provide the answers in this capacity. You're no longer in the United States Senate. You voted in 1999 to remove Bill Clinton from office on charges of perjury, correct?
That is correct.
In connection,
well, there were other charges. I voted
simple
for
question.
impeachment. Yes.
Yes, understand. To remove him, actually, impeachment's in the House. In connection with that vote to remove President Clinton from office, you gave this speech on the Senate floor on February 29th, 1999, and in it, you acknowledged that while serving as U.S. attorney, you once prosecuted a young police officer who lied in a deposition. And in that speech, you decided to prosecute that young police officer even though he corrected his testimony. Now, you've testified under oath before the Senate Judiciary Committee in January. You subsequently corrected that testimony in a March 6 written submission.
and have been forced repeatedly to come back to the Senate and now the House to clarify. When explaining your vote on the Senate floor to remove Bill Clinton from office, you stated that you refuse to hold a president accountable to a different standard than the young police officer who you prosecuted. Let me be clear. The Attorney General of the United States of America should not be held to a different standard than the young police officer whose life you ruined by prosecuting him for perjury. I yield back.
The gentleman may respond if he chooses to.
Mr. Jeffries, nobody, not you or anyone else should be prosecuted, not me, or accused of perjury for answering the question the way I did in this hearing. I've always tried to answer the questions fairly and accurately. But to ask, did you ever do something, do you ever meet with Russians and deal with the campaign? You're saying Mr. Carter Page, who left that meeting, according to the press reports, and I guess his deposition or interview has been reported as saying, I'm going to Russia. I made no response to him, didn't acknowledge it. And you're accusing me of lying about that? I say that's not fair, Mr. Jeffries. I would say that's not fair, colleagues. That's not on any indication that I in any way participated in anything wrong. And the same with Mr. Papadopoulos. He talked about, it's reported in the paper, that he said something about going to Russia and dealing with the Russians, and I pushed back and said you shouldn't do it. So I don't think it's right to accuse me of doing something wrong. I had no participation in any wrongdoing with regard to influencing this campaign improperly.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. DeSantis, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Attorney General.
All right, guys, normally I would say this can get sort of slow and maybe tedious, monotonous, but I think this is a pretty interesting session right here, this testimony. Attorney General Sessions is getting pretty hard pressed by some of these House members, and it's pretty interesting to me to stay on here. I just want to tease really quick what we're coming up next to. You see in the right corner of your screen, that's going to be a representative from Virginia, Barbara Comstock. She's going to be talking about what she alleges is that she says a current congressman exposed himself to a young female staffer, and hopefully she'll illuminate that a little bit further in this little briefing here. This is going to be tape playback that we're bringing in to our system here today, but it's a relevant story, and we're going to be kind of talking about this for the day, into the evening, and of course throughout this week as new information is coming out on Capitol Hill on how to sort of address this type of issue on Capitol Hill, how to conduct oneself in a lawmaker's office, and everything surrounding that. So that'll be quite interesting. We'll bring that full screen and bring up the sound on that when it comes up. But for now, we'll stay here with this hearing. Hope you're enjoying it, guys. And thank you for joining us here on the stream at Fox 5 Live.
He was telling the president, you're not under investigation. So that's what he said. So I think that may have been misapplied, but I understand what you're saying.
I did follow the advice I was given.
I know you did. You've talked about you can't confirm or deny investigations. I think that's a good policy. Why was Comey allowed to confirm that investigation in March 20th, which invited all kinds of irresponsible speculation? You were recused. Somebody in the department authorized him to do that. Why did they break with the policy?
This was this March 20th you're talking about? I'm not, I don't recall how that exactly occurred, but I do agree with you, Congressman, that Mr. Comey talked more than he should. And he had no power, right, or justification in announcing the conclusion of a criminal investigation. He was the investigator, not the
I agree. I don't want to, sorry to interrupt. I got limited time. I agree with you. Let me move on. Uranium One case, I know you've been asked about it. Can you say, forget about whether it's under investigation, in the past, did the FBI or DOJ inform either President Obama, Secretary Clinton, or any cabinet secretary that it had uncovered evidence that Rosatom's main U.S. executive, Vadim Mikirin, was engaged in bribery, kickbacks, and money laundering
before the Obama administration approved the Uranium One sale in 2010.
Is that the Micron matter, the matter that was prosecuted in Maryland?
2014, but there was an informant in 2009, 2010. The FBI had evidence of bribery, kickbacks, and money laundering. Was that information conveyed to any of the relatives?
To be a diplomatic power, you must be a military power, and to be a military power, you must be an economic power. And these two votes today will mean a brighter, safer future for all Americans. Our plan was written with hardworking men and women in mind. You know, they say that half of Americans would have a difficult time coming up with $400 in case of an emergency. Now consider a tax relief plan that would provide those same Americans $1,182 in their wallets. That could make a big difference. And we want to get this legislation on the president's desk as soon as possible. You may have noticed the boxes around us. Yes, these are petitions. They are full, over 177,000 individuals, small business owners from across the country who have signed this petition in support of us taking important action. I've also invited Representative Whitman from Virginia to be with us to talk about tax reform, as well as in his position as chair of the Armed Services Subcommittee on Sea Power and Projection Forces. He's certainly been a strong leader throughout the NDAA process. There's a lot going on, but at the end of the day, this is about us making sure that the men and women in uniform have the support that they need to protect our country, and we're also fulfilling a promise to provide tax relief to every person. Thank you.
Well, Kathy, thank you. And the effort that the House is undertaking and will pass will provide more jobs, fairer taxes, and bigger paychecks. That's what everyone across the United States is looking forward to. It will help our businesses, help them grow, help our country become more prosperous. That's the direction that people want this nation to move in. Our National Defense Authorization Act is an extraordinary product of folks from both sides of the aisle to make sure that we are taking care of our men and women in uniform, making sure we're providing them what they need, making sure that we are increasing the readiness of our forces, making sure we are maintaining the equipment that they so desperately need, and making sure we're modernizing to keep up with our adversaries across the world. The $634 billion that we will dedicate in the base budget toward that goes a long way to getting our military where it needs to be today. So I am anxious to have the opportunity to have this bill on the floor today, the conference report, to advocate for it, and to see its bipartisan passage at the end of the day. Thank you.
Leave that alone there. It's an exciting week in the House. We're passing some really important legislation. Today, we're going to pass the National Defense Authorization Act, which provides the funding our military needs, gives them real certainty, and gives our troops a much-needed pay raise. So that's going to be an important vote. We're also going to pass the flood insurance, National Flood Insurance Program reauthorization. This bill is important, has really good reforms for taxpayers. It gives real certainty to policyholders, and I'm looking forward to a good vote there. And then, of course, later in the week, we're going to answer a call that we've heard from all across this country. Families have been struggling for too long. Our economy's been sluggish for too long. You can see these boxes of petitions back here where you have Americans from all across the country who have been calling on Congress to cut taxes and get the economy moving again. The good news is this week we're taking action to answer that call. This tax cut and jobs bill that we're going to pass later this week will provide tremendous tax relief to families across the board. You're going to see very, very large tax cuts for middle-class families. Families that have been struggling, that are living paycheck to paycheck, are going to see real benefits. You're going to see our country finally be competitive again. We are all sick and tired of watching jobs get moved overseas because we have the highest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world. And for so long, people have been saying, why don't you do something about it? We this week are doing something about it. We're actually going to be
Okay, guys, so a little mistake there. You are clearly watching Representative Steve Scalise talk about tax reform. It is not the press conference that I was expecting, which was Representative Barbara Comstock talking about this continued alleged sexual harassment case that she's been talking about. So we're going to get more information on that. Hopefully, if that does come down on our stream, we'll bring that to you. But I really do want to play out the press conference on Capitol Hill from this morning. Now, we also still have the live look inside. Actually, David Cicilline is up right now questioning Attorney General Jeff Sessions. You can see that's a live take right there at this hearing, which has proven to be pretty interesting, kind of flow in throughout the afternoon. This other thing that we just showed you, tape playback now of the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. He's there with some other House leaders, of course, talking about tax reform. So what I really do want to play out is the press conference from this morning about sexual harassment, because I think it's really interesting and important to bring this to the forefront. This was scheduled this morning, and it's basically the Hill saying, hey, this is a systemic problem that's also within lawmakers on Capitol Hill. And we'll hear more from Representative Comstock as she explains what she says, that a current Congressman exposed himself while in a towel to a young staffer. So they were talking about, in this very anticipated hearing this morning, they were talking about preventing it in the workplace, any workplace, but of course also on Capitol Hill. And also slated to testify was Congresswoman Jackie Speer, who says she was the victim of repeated sexual harassment during her previous career as a Hill staffer before she became what she was. So again, this is a playback of a different press conference that I was not expecting. So we're going to play out now this sexual harassment presser. I think it'll be interesting. If it gets a little bit dry, we'll move back on to the live look inside Sessions hearing. All right, guys, here we go.
I look forward to learning from this hearing ways we can improve the House generally and how we can ensure that we take the lessons learned from today's hearing and improve the House Ethics Committee processes as well. And in closing, I would like to just commend the three female members here who've just shared, and as we've learned, all started as staffers. And it's very important, and I'm just pleased to be a part of this today. I was not a staffer here on the Hill, had never worked on the Hill prior to coming to Congress, but I think it's very powerful that the three of you who are here in many ways representing House staff and now as strong voices on behalf of not only your districts, but on behalf of the country as members. So thank you, and I yield back.
Congresswoman Brooks yields back. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, for the purposes of an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Brady, thank you very much for calling this hearing, and I also want to thank our distinguished witnesses for their leadership and their perseverance in dealing with this issue. The nation is in an uproar today over sexual assault and sexual harassment. From the studios of liberal Hollywood to the studios of Fox News, from Wall Street to Alabama, there is a tectonic shift taking place in women's unwillingness to put up with what prior generations of women were often forced to accept as business as usual. And I believe the public generally has seen enough too and wants action. In Congress, we must be leaders in changing a culture of sexual harassment and assault, not just by what we say in our legislation, but by what we do in our own workplace. Justice Brandeis once said, "Our government is the potent, the omnipresent teacher. For good or for ill, it teaches the whole people by its example." Mr. Chairman, sexual harassment at work is a pervasive problem that's been documented. The EEOC estimated that anywhere from 25% to 85% of women have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. And let's be clear that it is illegal, whether it takes the form of quid pro quo, sexual harassment, or hostile workplace environment harassment. It constitutes sex discrimination, and it degrades the professional status and social position of women. To think that this body is somehow immune from sexual harassment and abuse of women would be naive at best. At last count, more than 1,500 former staffers signed a petition directly calling on us to reform policies aimed at preventing sexual harassment and adjudicating complaints. My chief of staff, Julie Tagan, who has spent most of her career on Capitol Hill, says she does not know a single woman in her age group who has not experienced inappropriate conduct in the workplace. As businesses across the country face their responsibilities for creating harassment-free workplaces, we must do our own part and lead by example in the public sector. A critical first step is requiring annual mandatory sexual harassment prevention and response training for members of Congress and staffers alike, just as we require ethics and cybersecurity training. I am a proud co-sponsor of Representative Spear's CEASE resolution, House Resolution 604, the Congressional Education About Sexual Harassment Eradication Resolution. And I would urge the House to quickly move to adopt this measure as the Senate did last week. Although this is an important place to start, mandating annual sexual harassment training is not sufficient. We must examine existing dispute resolution processes, which recent incidents suggest may be acting still as a deterrent to reporting and resolving problems. I'm eager to hear from our witnesses today on what more can be done, and I understand that there are multiple proposals that have been put on the table aimed at encouraging reporting, soliciting feedback, promoting a healthy workplace environment, and protecting staffers against retaliation. I'm eager to learn how we can work together in a completely bipartisan way, Mr. Chairman, to create a workplace safe for all of our employees and that all Americans can be proud of. Thank you, and I look forward to the testimony today.
Gentleman from Maryland yields back. I'd now like to introduce our witnesses on our first panel. Representative Jackie Spear represents California's 14th Congressional District. She serves on the House Committee on Armed Services as the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Military Personnel and on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. She received her BA in Political Science from the University of California, Davis, and a JD from UC Hastings College of the Law. Representative Spear has been and continues to be a tireless advocate for women's rights. We appreciate her efforts in raising awareness of sexual harassment and being with us today. Representative Bradley Byrne represents Alabama's 1st Congressional District. In Congress, Representative Byrne serves on the House Committee on Armed Services as well as the Education and Workforce Committee. After completing his undergraduate studies at Duke University, Representative Byrne received his law degree from the University of Alabama School of Law. He practiced labor and employment law in Alabama for over 30 years. During Representative Byrne's practice, he advised multiple businesses on harassment policies, protocol, and procedures, and litigated numerous employment cases. He also has overseen multiple sexual harassment investigations over his many years of practice. So Representatives Spear and Byrne, the committee has received your written testimony. You'll now each be given 5 minutes to present a summary of that submission. And to help you keep time, as you've done on the other end, you know how it works. 5 minutes, with 1 minute to go, it'll go yellow. With time up, it'll go red. And we certainly want to thank both of you for this time. So the chair will now recognize Representative Spear for 5 minutes for her summary.
Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you. And let me begin by saying how impressed I am with the seriousness with which you are undertaking this issue. It is complex and it will be at times uncomfortable to deal with it. It's important to note that 2 out of 3 sexual assaults go unreported in this country. And oftentimes, sexual harassment leads to sexual assault. Since I shared my own story on /MeToo Congress, I have had numerous meetings and phone calls with staff members, both present and former, women and men who have been subjected to this inexcusable and oftentimes illegal behavior. In fact, there are 2 members of Congress, Republican and Democrat, right now, who have been subject to review or not have been subject to review, but have engaged in sexual harassment. These harasser propositions such as, are you going to be a good girl? To perpetrators exposing their genitals, to victims having their private parts grabbed on the House floor. All they ask in return as staff members is to be able to work in a hostile-free work environment. They want the system fixed and the perpetrators held accountable. I've been working on this issue since 2014 and believe there are 3 steps Congress needs to take to fix the egregious and sometimes illegal behavior. The first step is to require sexual harassment prevention and response training every year for both members and staff, just like ethics and cybersecurity training. The existing Office of Compliance online training model is a start, as some of you have pointed out, but it is not adequate. Research has found that effective training requires in-person, interactive instruction and dialogue. A simple change to the House rules will achieve this result, and there's already legislation co-authored by many of you, H.R. 604. And I want to give a special thanks to Ranking Member Brady, Representatives Costello, Palinquin, Lofgren, and Raskin for their co-leadership on this issue. Second, we can fix what we don't know. In my experience working on sexual harassment and sexual violence on college campuses, in academia, and in our military, climate surveys are conducted regularly and are key to recognizing the scope of the problem and to evaluating the effectiveness of reforms. That's why Congress should institute a Congressional climate survey every 2 years. Third, we must reform the broken dispute resolution system. The present system may have been okay in the dark ages. It is not appropriate for the 21st century. Under the current process, as you see on the monitor, Congressional employees are at best unaware or confused, and at worst are utterly betrayed. This flow chart shows the current process. First, you report the incident to the OC. You then have mandatory counseling for 30 days. After that, you are required, and I underscore required, to sign a non-disclosure agreement before you even begin mediation. You then have mandatory mediation for 30 days. Additionally, the harasser and the member's office are represented by House of Representatives counsel. Now listen, how does that compute? They are provided free legal counsel. The victim is not. I've also heard from mediators who say Congressional process is atypical in that survivors don't have the option to be in separate rooms as the defendant's counsel, and that survivors are often addressed in an aggressive manner. Additionally, the fact that House counsel works on behalf of the alleged harasser during mediation and then is charged with advocating to this committee for the settlement agreement on behalf of the survivor seems to be a conflict of interest. If the employee makes it this far, they then have to go through another 30 days of what they call a cooling off period. So now 90 days have elapsed, and that employee is still required to work in that legislative office, or else they're not eligible for services through the OOC. Now, I might also point out at this junction that interns and fellows don't even have this process to access, so they have nowhere to go. After the 30 days cooling off period, then you can either file a formal complaint in a federal district court, or you can have an administrative hearing where there's negotiations, the settlement is approved, and then we move forward.
Hey guys, while we bring you this press conference from earlier this morning, I think it's pretty interesting and illuminating to see them talk about sexual harassment on the Hill. Check out this live video, right corner of your screen. That's some dangling scaffolding in New York City. We just got alerted of that stream. It's some aerial view of it. It looks like some steam or smoke, and you can't really quite see until there's more of a wide shot, but that is Manhattan, guys. Once we find out more details about exactly where and what's happening, we'll bring that to you. We're going to keep kind of playing out this presser and bring you these pictures live right corner of your screen.
And finally, as one of them said to me, who I met with last week, I'm a single mother. I can't afford to lose my job. The thought of being blackballed in this institution, the thought of being somehow subject to reprisals, all of that has an effect. So I really feel that it's important for us to move forward, not just with training, but to move forward with a comprehensive reform of the Office of Compliance. Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask unanimous consent to submit the letter for the record of some 1,500 former members of staff in Congress, and I think I've made copies available to all of you. If you flip through those pages, you will see that they range back into the 70s all the way to the current time. So,
Without objection.
With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman Spear, for that very powerful and insightful testimony that you've given us today. The chair will now recognize Representative Bradley Byrne for the purposes of an opening statement. We look forward to hearing from you, Congressman Byrne, on your experience to let us know what's happening in the private sector and your time that you spent working on those cases. So the chair now recognizes you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Harper. Thank you, Member Brady, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today on this important topic. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. In 1986, sexual harassment was recognized by the Supreme Court as a violation of Title VII. In 1995, Congress passed the Congressional Accountability Act, or CAA, subjecting us to Title VII. Based on my prior experience and recent research into the current policies regarding harassment here in Congress, I want to make a few observations and offer some of my own suggestions. First, we need to mandate harassment training. I strongly believe the House should require mandatory sexual harassment training for all members and employees. Recent events have demonstrated that training, while available to members of Congress and employees, is underutilized. I will also note that mandatory training in the House is not unprecedented and is already required for ethics and computer security. There are also multiple harassment trainings currently provided by different congressional support offices. It's my opinion that this committee should settle on one high-quality training product to make sure that all House employees are trained in the same manner. Number two, we should consider a universal harassment policy for all House employees. Although not required by law, creating and enforcing anti-harassment policies is now a near universal norm in the private sector. As you are aware, each individual congressional office is an independent hiring authority, and each office has its own policies. Given the unique nature of House employment, it is my opinion that a uniform, universal anti-harassment policy based upon the CAA and applicable to all House members and employees would be much more effective in curbing unwanted sexual harassment than the current patchwork of different harassment policies that we have today throughout offices on Capitol Hill. With a universal policy, the training of House employees would be simplified and made consistent across the House. Number three, we should examine the Congressional Accountability Act and consider improvements to the complaint and enforcement process. It's been over 20 years since Congress enacted the Congressional Accountability Act. I believe this is an opportune time to revisit and consider revisions to this important statute. The statutory provisions governing harassment claims in the legislative branch are different than those that govern private sector employment and other public employees. In the private sector, the EEOC administers and enforces laws against workforce discrimination. The EEOC investigates discrimination complaints based upon a protected class. The process begins by an aggrieved party filing a charge with the EEOC. The EEOC then has the option to request the parties engage in mediation. However, mediation is not required for either party. If mediation is not requested or it's unsuccessful, the EEOC has investigatory power, including subpoena power. After the investigatory process is complete, the EEOC has the right to bring a case upon an aggrieved individual's behalf or to issue the individual a right to sue letter, allowing the aggrieved party to bring litigation. In contrast, the Office of Compliance has no investigative authority and cannot prosecute harassment claims. And the CAA requires mandatory counseling, as Ms. Spear pointed out, for those making claims. We should work to bring the OOC process and authority in line with that of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Other suggestions for revisions to the Act, in my opinion, would include subjecting our unpaid workforce, such as interns, pages, and fellows, to the Act's anti-discrimination provisions. Certainly, these changes will increase the workload of the OOC, and we need to be prepared to provide them the necessary appropriations. Fourth, we need to increase member accountability. Given the constitutional nature of our offices, member-on-member sexual harassment is not something where harassment law and the employment structure can easily be applied. In this matter, it is my opinion that we must exercise our constitutional duty to discipline our own membership. I believe we should adopt a specific policy for this kind of behavior in our Code of Official Conduct, more expressly than one we presently have, that would send a signal that member-on-member sexual harassment
will not be tolerated, and that members of this body support those being harassed and reporting these incidents to the Ethics Committee. Moreover, while an employee may be able to obtain monetary relief under the CAA, a settlement or judgment is paid by the taxpayers. Personally, I find this unacceptable. If a member of Congress settles a claim as the harasser or is found liable as the harasser, it is my belief that the member should be personally liable or required to repay the Treasury for such damages. Furthermore, any payment out of the Treasury in response to a claim of discrimination or harassment by House office should be made in a manner that is fully transparent. Finally, it is my opinion that given the inherent power differential between a member and their staff that they supervise, we should include a strict prohibition on members engaging in a sexual relationship with staff under their direct supervision. In closing, I appreciate the opportunity to share my observations and would be happy to provide more information to the committee as necessary.
I want to thank you, Congressman Byrne, for your testimony and with your experience that you bring. And Congresswoman Spear, we want to thank you as well. I know that this is such an important issue, and you've given us much to think about as we go through this review process. With that, we'll excuse you, and I believe Congresswoman Spear will move up to the dais.
Mr. Chairman.
We'll now take just a moment to get our second panel in place.
Mr. Chairman, the Judiciary Committee has the Attorney General as a witness in oversight right now, so I'm going to excuse myself.
So guys, what do you think so far about this hearing? Again, this was pre-taped this morning and we're playing it back for you because I think it's obviously super timely and relevant and interesting and also important to be heard. And it's sort of unlike other gatherings and hearings that we get to see on Capitol Hill. Of course, hearing from Jackie Spear, current Congresswoman, talking about her past and also just sort of what they're doing now, past and present, for changing some of this conduct that even happens within some of these lawmakers' offices on the Hill. It's just rampant everywhere. We've seen it. We're seeing everybody come out in Hollywood, of course, and that's spurring people on. So as they reset here for their next panel, we'll listen in to see what they have to say. I'm excited to bring you back into the newsroom later and introduce you to another person on our digital team who's going to chat with me a little bit, and we'll close out the show from there. But I want to thank you guys so much for being loyal and for watching us today on the stream. Right now, just a live look at the Capitol Dome. There it is. And we're going to jump back into the hearing as they reset for that second panel. Hope that you guys are interested in it and that you're enjoying your day and enjoying our stream here. All right, guys, we're going to go back, double shot it here. You're looking at a live look inside our newsroom, too. You can see our assignment desk behind me. They're getting all the calls and all the breaking news, whatever's happening. So if anything comes up for us, we're going to bring you that video live. So again, this just happened a few hours ago, really moments ago, and it's continuing as a story because we're going to be hearing more from Tom Fitzgerald, our reporter, who's going to be talking about the recent allegations from Representative Comstock. All right, let's jump back in.
Educate us as we discuss this very serious issue of how we're going to prevent sexual harassment in Congress as we go forward. I'd now like to take a moment to introduce each of you. Mrs. Barbara Childs Wallace currently serves as the chair of the Board of Directors of the Office of Compliance. She received her undergraduate degree from Purdue University in 1973, her JD from Loyola University of Chicago in 1977, and an LLM in labor law with highest honors from the National Law Center of George Washington University in 1979. Ms. Childs Wallace has worked at Carter, Child, and Caraway since 1983 in the field of labor law, giving her 37 years of experience in this area. She also served as chairman of the Labor and Employment section of the Mississippi Bar Association. We welcome you, Ms. Childs Wallace. Ms. Gloria Lett currently serves as counsel to the Office of House Employment Counsel. She received her undergraduate degree from State University of New York and her JD at George Washington University. Prior to serving as counsel, Ms. Lett was a corporate attorney handling employment law issues and litigation for a large telecommunications company. She also served as an assistant corporation counsel representing the District of Columbia in civil litigation, as a special assistant United States attorney for the District of Columbia handling criminal prosecutions, and as an attorney for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We welcome you, Ms. Lett. The committee has received each of your written testimonies. Each witness will have 5 minutes to present a summary of that submission. As you know, to help you keep the time, when I recognize you, the light will be green for 4 minutes. It'll turn yellow for the last minute and red when the time is up. So at this time, the chair now recognizes, for the purposes of an opening statement, Mrs. Barbara Childs Wallace.
Good morning, Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, distinguished members of the Committee of House Administration, Congresswoman Spear, and Congressman Byrne. It's an honor to be here today representing not only the Office of Compliance, but its Board of Directors, which I chair. The other members of the board are Susan Robfogel from New York, Roberta Holtzworth from Illinois, Barbara Kamens from the District of Columbia, and Alan Friedman from California. And we were appointed to these part-time positions on the board by the majority and the minority leadership of both houses of Congress. We're required by the Congressional Accountability Act, or commonly known as the CAA, to each have professional expertise in the application of the workplace laws that apply to the legislature by the CAA. In fact, all 5 of us who are in private practice have decades of experience within the private sector, and a few of us also within the federal government in both labor and employment and discrimination issues. The CAA also requires that we are to be appointed without regard to political affiliation. Our board has been serving since 1999, and we've worked diligently and in a nonpartisan manner during this time to try and ensure the rights of all individuals working on the Hill, that they are protected. I also want to thank the members of our staff, many of whom are here with me today. The OOC has a huge mandate from the statute, which we accomplish with approximately 20 full-time employees. They're very skilled and equally committed to the tasks laid out for us by the CAA. Finally, I want to especially thank Chairman Harper, who just happens to be my congressman from Mississippi. I'm originally from the Chicago area, but for the past 34 years, I've practiced employment law in Jackson, Mississippi. It's nice to see a neighbor holding the gavel, and we appreciate the fact so much that you have called for this important hearing to take place. As you know, Congress, and has been testified to already, Congress created our office in 1995 under the CAA, which has incorporated 13 federal workplace laws that are applicable in the private sector and the executive branch to the legislative community. This act designates 3 primary responsibilities for our office, although there are many other statutory functions that are performed in addition. First, we inspect the Capitol grounds and the legislative branch facilities to ensure that our community is free from occupational safety and health hazards and is accessible to persons with qualified disabilities. Second, and especially pertinent to the subject of this hearing, we provide an alternative dispute resolution program to covered employees who seek to assert their rights under the CAA. And third, also pertinent to this hearing, our office maintains a robust and comprehensive outreach and education program to this community about their rights, responsibilities, and protections under the Act. In addition, the CAA mandates that our board report to Congress every 2 years on our recommendations for changes to the CAA based on the labor and employment laws in the private sector and in the executive branch. Mr. Chairman, since 2010, our board has zealously advocated in these biennial reports, also known as our 102B reports, for mandatory training on how to prevent and remedy harassment, discrimination, and retaliation of all sorts in the entire legislative community, the sort of training that is regularly performed in the private sector and in the legislative branch, in the executive branch. It is with great satisfaction that we see that this committee and the many lawmakers on Capitol Hill are responding to this recommendation. Before harassment can be corrected, everyone in the legislative community must understand the meaning of harassment, how to respond to it, and more importantly, how to avoid it. Consistent with our statutory mandate to inform and to educate individuals within the legislative branch, our board believes that mandatory training on harassment, discrimination, and retaliatory behavior will provide the best avenue to not only avoid the conduct in the future, but to help transform the legislative branch into a model work environment whereby the lawmakers can and do lead by example. This concludes my remarks, and I ask that my extended statement that has been submitted to the committee be included in the record of this hearing. I now look forward to any questions that you might have, and thank you again.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Chair will now recognize Ms. Gloria Lett for 5 minutes for the purposes of an opening statement.
Good morning. My name is Gloria Lett, as you know, and I'm one of the attorneys with the Office of House Employment Counsel, also known as OHEC. OHEC is basically an in-house law firm available to members of Congress, each of which is a separate employment office, committees, House officers, to provide advice and counsel on the various issues that arise under the Congressional Accountability Act, and specifically, for purposes of this hearing, the question of sexual harassment. We are there as a partner with employment offices to help them understand the issue of sexual harassment and to help them prevent and address the issue of sexual harassment when it does occur in the workplace. I'm very grateful to be here to have this opportunity to talk about my office and the resources that we do provide to House employment offices. OHEC basically has 3 core functions. Those are to provide counseling, to provide training, and to provide representation and litigation when employees raise claims of sexual harassment in their workplaces. The way that manifests itself, and I think it's important to keep in mind that our office is a nonpartisan office. All contacts with our office are confidential, protected by the attorney-client privilege. And so when we are called by employment offices to talk about these issues, I think it's a good model in that they can speak frankly to us, we can ask difficult questions, we can learn the good and the bad and the really bad, and give them advice and counsel on how to address those issues. We talk about the legal issues, but more importantly, we talk about how the office can address issues and take appropriate corrective action to make sure that the behavior stops. That corrective action can range from counseling, sending an employee to training, or discipline up to and including termination. And there is accountability in congressional offices and House offices for individuals who engage in harassment. Sometimes they are indeed fired. The other part of our role is to provide training. We provide training on a request basis. We provide training on a regular basis. The House officers and the IG, for example, schedule mandatory training for all new employees and all new managers. And they schedule that directly with our office, and we conduct that training. We also do training after there has been an issue of sexual harassment. So we go to district offices as a follow-up to make sure that the behavior doesn't happen again. And we do it on a request basis for those offices that are proactive on these issues. We do 3 types of training, actually. One is anti-harassment training that is specifically for employees. Again, that's on a request basis by an office, and we educate employees about what sexual harassment is. That's in-person training. We have vignettes and video where we stop the training at each section and we explain the behavior, and we have a conversation so that employees understand what they've seen and how it can be unlawful and how they can report that behavior to their management so that it can be addressed. We also do something called sensitivity training. The sensitivity training is broader because, as you know, sexual harassment is unlawful under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, but so is racial harassment, and so is harassment based on an individual's religion. So we discuss those broader issues, but we also discuss sexual harassment in the context of that training. And lastly, we do training for managers. And that training, in my view, is vitally important to be in-person training because managers have to navigate around a lot of issues in order to properly handle the issue of sexual harassment. Not only do they face claims by employees who allege harassment, but they could also face claims by an employee who has been accused of harassment if the office doesn't properly investigate the issue and conduct it in a fair manner. So if someone is accused of harassment and they feel that it was unfair or discriminatory, the result, they can also sue the office. And so we help offices manage that. And lastly, we do represent employing offices in litigation when an employee goes to the Office of Compliance. Sometimes we know that those cases are going to happen because we've advised the office and they've done everything in their power to correct the issue, and sometimes we don't know about it. And so we do represent them and do corrective action in that context as well. Thank you.
I want to thank both of you for taking the time to be here and to educate us as we go through this critical review process and come up with a plan to make sure that we do prevent future cases of sexual harassment, hopefully decrease your workload in the process. So at this time, the members will have an opportunity to ask questions, and I'll now begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes for questions. And I'll start with you, if I may, Ms. Childs-Wallace. And I want to thank you for that insight you've given us to highlight what the Office of Compliance's adjudication process is. So I've got a couple of questions just to make sure we understand that fully. I want you to describe the importance of each step in the process, and for example, how important is the counseling intake step that you have, and why is confidentiality important during this phase?
The counseling process, I think, is somewhat of a misnomer. It is more like an intake process. It's not therapy to the person who comes in seeking or initiating the counseling step. People who come to us often, well, most likely are not lawyers. They don't know the statutes necessarily, and they need assistance to see whether or not their claims fit within the context of the 13 laws that are applicable under the CAA. To give you a very basic example, if you have someone who comes in and says, I think that I've been discriminated against on the basis of my age, and in the intake process, well, how old are you? I'm 30 years old. Our statute does not cover you till you're 40 for age discrimination. It's that kind of information that it's a give and take to let them know the law. It also is a time when our office can explain what the proceedings are, and the employee can determine whether or not they want to go that route. Oftentimes, things are resolved during that period very easily. Confidentiality is not meant to be a gag order. It's confidential primarily for the Office of Compliance. We don't call up the employing office and say, your employee has come in to see us about X, Y, and Z. What it is the employee still has the ability to go out and talk to their friends and neighbors and say, my supervisor has done A, B, and C. We don't contact the employing office. It is maintained confidentially so that the employee has a chance to learn the system, learn what the laws are. One thing about the 30-day period, the law specifically says that 30 days can be cut short on the request of the employee. So if the employee comes in and gets the information that they need, and they say, fine, I know what I'm going to do, counseling ends, and it may last 1 day. So it doesn't have to be a 30-day period.
Talk to me for just a minute, if you would, about the mediation phase, and what, just in general terms, what percentage of cases are resolved during that part of mediation?
I don't have the specific statistics on it, but what I've been informed about from my staff is that about 40 to 50% of the cases are resolved during the counseling or mediation period. So that's a significant amount that are resolved. The mediation process is very similar to mediation
that Congressman Byrne would have seen with the EEOC. It is not required that the employee attend. This is particularly important for employees in our district offices. It is not required that they sit in the same room with the person that they are accusing of sexual harassment, for instance, in this instance. They can be in separate rooms. I've done countless mediations in my private practice where the two may never even look at each other. They may be in separate.
Hey guys, if you are just joining us either on our website, fox5dc.com, or here on the YouTube stream, just want to let you know what you're watching. This is playback from a hearing this morning on Capitol Hill with various lawmakers talking about what can be done, what has been done, and what steps we really do need to take to combat some of the inappropriate conduct going on, particularly on Capitol Hill. And this is definitely of interest. I think a timely story, like I was saying, and trying to just bring you the relevant topics. So that's what you are watching now. And then right corner of your screen, you have a live look inside our newsroom, just kind of what's going on. Nothing too bustling right now. Nothing really happened. We've been looking in and out of the Senate, or rather the House chambers, the House Judiciary Committee, where the Attorney General was this morning. And that hearing is kind of ongoing. Right now we have an empty look at that chamber room there. It sounds like they're likely on a break, but we're back to this video that I've been playing out, and we'll probably do so to the remainder of our stream here. We usually go here from 11:30 to 2, and prior to me, you'll see Mike Thomas do some weather and other topics in the morning. So stay with us and join us every weekday, 11 to 2, for just live topics, breaking news, various news sources, personalities from inside the newsroom, whatever it is, so you can get kind of an inside look here at Fox 5 DC. And be sure to follow us on the platforms too. I definitely help with the Snapchat and the Instagram. We're all Fox 5 DC on all those platforms. And then we have constant tweets going out with all the updated news stories that our web team, right behind me, is so diligently working on every day. So just a little recap of what you're watching, and I'm thankful to some of the regulars who are here on the stream as usual. And so stay with us, guys. We're going to play this out towards the end. If we have anything else happening inside, I'll bring it back into our newsroom to chat with you guys a little bit more. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Going to go to the Office of Compliance. What the courts have said is that if an employer takes appropriate corrective action designed to stop the behavior, they are going to be insulated from liability in hostile work environment cases. But sometimes employees are not satisfied with that, so they will go to the Office of Compliance, and we expect it. As Barbara just mentioned, the counseling phase is confidential, but the employee can waive that and reach out to the employee. Typically, we will find out about mediation when there's been a notice of mediation issued.
Thank you both very much. Chair will now recognize Ranking Member Mr. Brady for the purpose of questions for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for both of you. It is important to have staff and managers participate in the anti-harassment training for the betterment of the workplace. Can you speak on how anti-harassment and discrimination training directly relates to less complaints and a better working place?
Well,
Either one.
I can take that one. I think it's very important that employees understand what sexual harassment is, that they have a right to come forward and report it, and that they will not be retaliated against if they do so. And that's what training accomplishes. It gives them knowledge. I think that will invariably lead to less complaints because an employer can address an issue before it becomes a formal process where they go to the Office of Compliance. I just ran into a chief of staff that I've known since I started in the Hill in 1996, and she told me in her experience she's only ever had one situation with sexual harassment, and I know that there are obviously many cases that go unreported. But she said that it was a staffer in the office. He said something that was inappropriate. She called him into her office. She read him the Riot Act, and she told him if it happened again, he would lose his job. So oftentimes, if employees are aware of these issues, it can be addressed at the earliest possible stage for the employee. And that's what we all want. We want employees to have safe and productive work environments. And I think it's important for employers to say to their employees, please come tell us. When we do the training for the managers, we tell them how important it is to talk to your employees, to walk around, to respond to rumors or anything that you hear where someone might be feeling uncomfortable, and then have a conversation with them. Oftentimes, these things can be addressed at the earliest possible stage.
I agree with everything that Ms. Lett said. The one thing I do want to add to it is that training is yet another opportunity to tell the employees, here is where you go if you have a problem. There's this entity called the Office of Compliance. One of the things that we're hearing so much in the media is that people on the Hill don't know who the Office of Compliance is. If there's a trainer in front of you that says there is this body, the Office of Compliance, and this is where you go to make a complaint, there's no reason why any employee on the Hill shouldn't know who we are and where we're located and how to make a complaint. I'd like to correct one thing that I said about the mediation process, that is a 30-day period that cannot be waived, and I misspoke on that.
Most of the complaints about harassment that are filed with the Office of Compliance are coming from non-member and non-committee officers, such as the AOC, CAO. How can we make staffers and members and committee officers feel comfortable speaking up on their issues with harassment or discrimination?
Well, I think that training, in training that I've done in my private practice, and I think that.
All right, guys, so I'm going to roll out of that video. Again, that was from earlier this morning, and obviously took up most of the remainder of our show today. But I want to introduce you guys to Sam. Let's go like full camera here into the newsroom. Sam is our newest digital producer. Hi. And she's here on the team. We're so excited to have her, and I wanted you to meet another face. So we'll kind of end by just chatting with her a little bit about what she's working on today, and obviously have you guys meet her, because she'll be hanging out in Foxville a little bit here and there and doing some stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Sam, what has it been like so far? What are you working on today?
Yeah, just working on posting the latest local news on the site. We've been working on a couple of surveillance video. I think a lot of people have been, I don't know, I think it's an interesting conversation because more people have been having surveillance cameras in their home to try and catch any specific predators. So we've had a couple of stories both today and yesterday where people were captured in a home.
People using the surveillance.
Yeah, and they were, it was as a way to capture people committing crimes like robberies and burglaries. So
interesting. Okay, that's a good one.
We have a video of a Mount Pleasant home that was in DC that was broken into, and a guy was kind of like lurking around the house. Wow. He was kind of like creeping through and took a bunch of things, $150 in cash, a couple of laptops, an iPad, an iPhone, and these two people were asleep. They didn't know anything.
And they got him because of the surveillance
video?
No,
they haven't yet, but we're looking, we're trying to investigate.
Definitely.
And we wanted to get the word out so that anybody who recognized this person could turn them into police. So
amazing.
But I think it just goes to show, like, if these people didn't have home surveillance, like, they'd probably be, kind of in a hard place without any video footage of who was in their home, even though they could say, this and this was taken.
Yeah.
So I think it's just kind of like a word to the wise. Like, if you're wary of that, the worst thing you could do is you have a video running in your home and no one breaks in. But,
yeah, definitely. It's amazing how these, like I said, the web, we cover pretty much everything. Like, I'm doing the stream over here. She's working hard on stories. You're at the assignment desk. We have a couple other digital producers. It can run the gamut. Human interest stories, petty crime stories.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everything.
Right.
You guys
I have other interests besides the local crime,
right?
but I mean, it's
your
the
brain
same
is just
time,
everywhere.
Yeah.
Pete says hi. He's one of the regulars on the stream, so we're glad to have you.
Hi.
Yeah, Sam will be kind of doing some work over here too, and taking in some of the daily streams, probably some of the weekend streams.
Yes, I'll be here on weekends.
As we do it. Yeah, so it'll be fun to kind of have you. But that's cool. That's an interesting sort of insight, because I'm over here sort of, obviously we were talking about sexual harassment today.
Yeah, you're on more of a national scale.
Yeah, national scale, and then whatever else, some local stuff that comes in if we have a reporter or photojournalist out on a live story and we have a feed coming in. But today was big national kind of stuff, and we also do stories on that. So that's sort of, you guys are covering everything.
Yeah. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, what else are you in the middle of? Anything else right now?
Yeah, just more local crime stuff. There's a shooting that we're working on. One of the other producers is working on a fatal shooting in Northern California.
Yeah.
That's been the big local breaker. I mean, not local, but the big breaking news. Besides whatever's going on in Capitol Hill and these hearings.
Sure.
So we were working on a lot of different things. And,
Good.
What else are we working on today?
Good. Yeah, well, I chatted a Museum of the Bible, which is the new thing on the mall. We kind of talked about that in our editorial meeting.
I saw some photos. Look neat.
It was cool. If you guys missed it, when you stop the stream, you can kind of go back. I scrolled through some of the photos, and I've seen some Instagrams and some posts about it. And it's supposed to look really, a lot of grandeur on the mall. Gold, bronze gates, and artifacts. That they said 3,100 pieces inside. I'm interested because I love new museums. Anything that's historical and nerdy.
Yeah. Have you been to the African American Museum?
I did. I was lucky enough to get one of those time tickets back in October when it opened, so I guess a year ago. Yeah, you got to check it out because you're relatively new to the area. Or wait, no, you've been here.
Yeah, I'm in Baltimore,
She's from Baltimore.
but I'm not that far from the DC area. And, so I commute for work, but at the same time, I have family here, so.
Super cool. Yeah, so I have been. So that's a really great one. We sometimes talk the cool stuff to see here because you don't want to forget and take it for granted how awesome the city is. So
there's
the stuff you gotta jump on.
I love the food scene here in DC.
Huge, and you're big time connected to it, as am I, and it's a good one to kind of chat about. So as we have cool stories with that, we'll bring you that as well, and I'm sure Sam will be working hard on the web with that writing, and you'll see her face around a little more. All right, guys. So with that, we're gonna continue our coverage on digital. So on Facebook, Twitter, our website. Continuing on, of course, into our evening broadcast if you're flipping on the TV in the area, 5, 6, and 6:30, and then into the nighttime. But with our broadcast here for the day, we'll see you tomorrow, 11 o'clock with Mike Thomas weather, and 11:30, I'll be jumping on with some more news and some more happenings of the day. So, Sam, we'll catch you tomorrow, I guess?
Yeah,
another
good.
time.
Yeah,
all right,
I'll see you guys.
Leave you
on
with
the
a shot.
flip side. Thanks so much for joining us.
See you later. We'll leave you with a shot of the Capitol, guys, on this cold November day. See you tomorrow.